Going to be carried.
Yeah, so I just, yeah, I just wanted to make sure I got it. Oh, that's the one, yes, yes. I have 15 and maybe.
No, they were, it was, there was,
I wonder if this is what Angela was looking for, was by the water fountain. Well, you know, it's, yeah. Yeah. Do you have her phone number? I don't know how to get in over there. I bet you she's looking for it. Yeah, we had family. We had family that came in. Yeah. No, I mean,
had just stepped into the restroom.
For you. I said, I bet you this is what she was looking for.
Yes. And you know what? I walked by and forgot I put it there. Don't see how out of it I am. 7:02. Yes, I did.
We would like to call the December 17, 2013 Board of Zoning Appeals meeting to order. If you would, please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Is the song?
Supposed to be. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time I'd like to introduce the board members, starting on my right.
Nancy Plesnarski.
Jim Hilly.
Gary Willis.
Christopher Bluer.
Todd Chernick.
The Board of Zoning Appeals is a quasi-legal board composed of resident volunteers of the City of Milton. The board is charged with hearing requests for variances from the standards of the zoning ordinance and appeals of administrative determinations. With regard to decisions on primary variances, the board's basis for decision is provided by these four considerations. A, relief if granted would not offend the spirit or intent of the ordinance. And B, there are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict application of the ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or topography, or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions not caused by the variance applicant. And C, relief if granted would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties. And D, that the public safety, health, and welfare are secured and the substantial justice is done. Would you introduce yourself, sir?
Walter Recook.
At this time, we need to approve the October meeting minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes.
We have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of approval, raise your right hand. Opposed, same side. We had two that abstained. Todd and Jim. Everybody else voted affirm. Our first case is V13011, Owens Lake Road. Angela, will you please present?
Yeah, I'll take. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I'm Paul Fricky with the City Attorney's Office, and we've had discussions with the applicant about the procedures to be followed. This is a little different. It's a secondary variance, which is an appeal of the Community Development Director's decision. We have not gotten fully together on those procedures as yet. We're still trying to work through so that we have an agreement that the ordinance and our bylaws leave some room to get it firmed up, and rather than try to do it and get that all cleared up in the middle of a public hearing, we're trying to get that set up ahead of time. We've both agreed, the applicant and the city, that it would be in the best interest to postpone that matter. Furthermore, it would allow us, the Community Development Director, to be present at the hearing. So we'd request that the board defer that matter until the January meeting. I believe that's January 21st.
Do we have a motion to defer?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Counselor, as much as you can, I'm not sure I'm clear as to what we're trying to clear up from a procedural standpoint. A lot of the people that are here from obviously the neighborhood, and I think they're here to obviously hear the case and speak to it. I understand it's in the best interest of the applicant.
Certainly.
We also have to take into consideration.
Generally, the situation we have is for a primary variance, the procedures are pretty clear. You have an applicant and those in the public in favor and those speaking against, and then the board considers it. With respect to an appeal, it's a secondary variance is more like an appeal. I mean, in effect, it is an appeal of a decision where it's a little different consideration. You're deciding whether or not a existing decision was correct or not. That being the case, the ordinance is written such that it kind of it might be read as reading that all variances are considered the same way under the same procedures. Our bylaws are written a little differently. We're making sure that there's no procedural dispute if the applicant were to be denied. We want to make sure that they have been involved in the procedural process, so there's not a procedural challenge to the hearing process. And we're trying to make sure that everybody is agreeable up front rather than having to go through the process and then have a procedural challenge which may or may not be upheld and then come back and have to do it all over again just on that procedural ground.
Right.
Trying to avoid having that.
Okay. But you expect it to be heard next month?
I expect it to. Just
barring any unforeseen
right.
things. Obviously, I know there are caveats.
Certainly.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do we have a motion to defer V13-011?
I'd like to go ahead and defer V13-011 on recommendation of council due to procedural, procedural issues.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor of deferring V13-001 to the January 2014 meeting, raise your right hand. Opposed, same side. Sorry if you're here from Six Hills. We'll see you in a month.
Thank you.
Next case, B13-012, 470 Champions View Drive. Angela, will you please present?
Yes, sir.
Have a seat. We'll call you up.
Just
V13-012. This site, 470 Champions View Drive, is a 1.232 acre lot with a single-family home in the Champions View subdivision. The subdivision is zoned AG1 and is located in the northwest Fulton overlay. A creek runs through the middle of the property. A 25-foot state waters buffer, along with a city 50-foot undisturbed buffer and a 75-foot impervious setback are required to be maintained. In his letter of appeal, Jim Pawson, a representative of Richard A. and Elizabeth T. Gita, hope I pronounced that right, proposes to construct a swimming pool in the rear of the house. When the house was constructed in 1993, only the 25-foot state buffer was required. The buffer requirements changed, and I'm sorry, I meant to get that year, placing the house in the 75-foot impervious setback and the 50-foot city stream buffer. Now, with the required buffers, there is limited room for additions to this house. There is no way to build a small swimming pool without it being located inside the buffer. According to the representative, the proposed location is the best for the swimming pool. The plan proposes a storm drain inlet system, which drains to a flow well, dry well, to mitigate the impact on the buffer. Section 20-425A2 states that no structures shall be constructed in the 75-foot impervious setback. Section 20-425AI states that no land disturbance is to be done and no structures are to be built in the 50-foot stream buffer. Since the proposed swimming pool and deck will encroach into these areas, a variance is required. Design Review Board comments. On December 3rd, 2013, the DRB offered the following comments. No objections. If no objections from adjacent properties, the pool should follow the guidelines that were in place when the property was purchased. Additional department comments. Staff held a focus meeting on December 13th, and the following comments were provided. Building plan review, site plan review, and DOT stormwater had no comments. The arborist stated that no specimen trees were evident. The applicant will have to mitigate for any disturbance in the 50-foot buffer and the 75-foot impervious setback. Standards for consideration. The approval of a stream buffer variance will only be considered in the following cases. A, when a property's shape, topography, or other physical conditions existing at the time of the adoption of this ordinance prevent land development unless a buffer variance is granted. And B, unusual circumstances when strict adherence to the minimal buffer requirement in the ordinance would create an extreme hardship. The applicant responds as follows. The house is built close to a dry creek bed. Unless a buffer variance is granted, there is no opportunity anywhere on the property for a swimming pool. If strict adherence to the minimal buffer requirements in the ordinance is abided by, then there will be an extreme hardship on the homeowner. Recommended conditions. Should the board choose to approve the application, staff recommends the following conditions. No additional structures are allowed on the property. This concludes the staff presentation.
Any questions from the board to staff?
Sir. Angela, I'm trying to find where I read it just a moment ago. It talks about that this is a dry creek bed. It may have been in the letter from the applicant. Do we
Right,
know for
that was their
opinion? Do we have any evidence one way or the other?
When I was there, I think there was water in it. There wasn't a lot, but I think there was water in it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions to staff from the board? At this time, we'd like to invite the applicant up to present, and if you'd please state your name and address for the board, we'd certainly appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Jim Paulson with American Lifestyle Pools at 2671 Ivy Creek Road, Beaufort, Georgia, swimming pool builder.
Anything you'd like to add beyond what was read?
No, I think there was a question as to whether there was or wasn't water in it, and I think that we see a drainage when there's rain is what we have, and there's a pipe that comes out of a farm somewhere.
Any other questions to the applicant from the board? Yes, sir.
I have two questions. For how much in feet, how many feet of encroachment are you requiring? And second to that, what's the square footage of encroachment that you're looking for?
The pool is measuring at a 16 by 32, so it's a smaller size pool. We're not trying to put a large one back there. The deck space in the design, we've got it engineered, and you can see specific. I don't have it right in front of me. Is that something that can be shared?
It's very small on our.
Okay, understood. We do have a large copy of it that's been submitted in multiple.
I have
And the design of the pool calls for, because the ground slopes off some, the furthest away, the closest into the encroachment, with the beam of the pool, the shell itself will be stoned up and just made a retaining wall. So we're not trying to put decking, for instance, inside. There'll be no deck space inside of, between the pool and the easements. So we'd like to be, we want to put a retaining wall to prevent any erosion right at the 26-foot mark, and the retaining wall itself is only a small one, 2 or 3 foot tall. And then the pool shell itself creates a retaining wall, and that would be another 2 feet exposed, so that we're keeping the integrity of the ground in that area completely stable by not trying to build any deck space. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. But it looks like, so based on the kidney shape of the pool, that your encroachment up to the retaining wall is going to be about 24 feet into the 50-foot buffer.
Okay, well,
26 feet off the,
26
off the
from,
creek,
right,
from
which,
rested.
which keeps us 25 feet plus, such that we're not encroaching the state buffer.
Understand. Okay. I think I can get what I need off this larger drawing. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
What year was your home built? Do you know?
Been there 10 years, and it's about 12 years old when we bought it. So, maybe approximately.
It says 93 in the packet.
So 1993?
Yes.
So it's much older than what you're telling me, which you probably didn't know, but anyway.
I thought it was about about 12 when we bought it. You've been there 10. So
Okay.
at least 22.
Okay.
The reason that's important is because back before the home was built and this plat was recorded, a lot of these areas did not have the buffer requirements that we do now in our community. Are there many other pools in your community?
Our neighborhood has a pool, but it's for the oldest phase. It's over there by the second phase. On our side of the street, I believe there may be two. On our side of the neighborhood, I believe there may be two, but most people on our side use the neighborhood pool.
And what type of deck are you planning to build?
As of right now, in the plan, it called for a concrete decking, which would be surfaced with an acrylic texturing, such that we can channel all the water properly down into the catch system. Should we choose to go to a paver stone, I'm not sure we would really accomplish much more, but there's potential that a paver stone could absorb some of the rainwater into the ground, possibly better. In a downpour, it's going to end up in the catch system, though.
And where exactly is your unit for handling the water?
That's also located in design. It's been engineered specific to the.
I'm talking about pool water. Where's your handling
system.
unit for the pump filter, the electrical unit?
It'll be located underneath the existing wooden deck up against the house, close to the house.
Okay. The reason I ask that is because sometimes neighbors complain about the noise from that unit, and also I wanted to make sure that we're not having a further encroachment that perhaps isn't shown on the plan.
Right. We also, at the time that this was submitted, we didn't have the signed letters. We've actually got both adjacent homeowners with signatures on it that I can submit at this
Give
time.
those to
as
Angela.
well. Ms. Angela?
It doesn't indicate on this plan, but I'm sure you have intent for putting a fence up. Where exactly are you planning to put that fence?
Well, we were planning on the property line, as you're looking at the front of my house. The neighbor to my right, it would be on that property line, and they're aware of that, and they're fine with it. And then at the 26-foot buffer. And then, I'm not exactly sure where on the left side of the pool, but enough to the left of the pool to incorporate the equipment.
So would the fence be very close to being on top of the wall or between the wall and the...
We want the fence to be beyond and lower and away from the swimming pool.
So in other words, that could actually encroach very close to that 25-foot mark.
Yeah, I
From the
would
state
say
buffer.
the fence would.
Okay.
We can't put the fence up on the top side of obviously the pool shell itself, so it would have to be beyond it.
You put it on top of the wall.
Okay, on top of the retaining wall, yes, it could be on top of the wall.
What type of wall is that?
It's an interlocking, like an Allen block, which is a Belgard decorative paver stone.
And how high is the wall going to be?
Probably just no more than 3 feet is what I would
Because
guess from.
you're aware about AASHTO regulations about how far, OSHA regulations about how far it drops.
Yes.
Anything over 36 inches, you've got a fence or screen.
Oh, we're going to have that yard already. I'm erosion control.
No.
Is that what you mean?
No, for fall hazard coming off the wall.
Yes.
So, okay.
So what you're suggesting, Walt, is that would be that could be integrated as part of the perimeter fencing for the pool, since it's already required?
Possibly. I don't want to tell them how to design.
No, I
think.
understand, but I'm trying to understand where you're going with the encroachment
Exactly.
piece.
I just don't want, whatever encroachment's being shown, I want to make sure we know exactly what is, and the fence is included as a potential encroachment. And that's why I'm asking the question. Because I know there's one that needs to be placed there somewhere, and I just want to be sure where it is, so we don't wind up with the inspector coming out there, and all of a sudden, you've got a fence out, and they go, oops, nope, it's not shown on your plan, it's not indicated. Too bad, so sad, try again. So that's why I want to make sure we get it cleared up in this hearing where you're going to put it. So either it's on top of the wall or the bottom of the wall, but we need to know.
So, sometimes these things, obviously, we want to take the right foot forward and make sure it's in the right location. And we would, I think, have been getting ahead of ourselves, really locating the fence when we're not sure what we can really do with the pool. So I apologize for not having that thought through. However, I think the best guess we would say is that between, well, the fence could even go lower, because a fence doesn't have to stay outside of the 25-foot. It does. It has to stay outside of the 25-foot buffer.
That's
a
question for
undisturbed buffer.
staff.
That's a question for Angela.
Excuse me, right, you can't put the fence through the buffer.
Okay. So then that's going to have to be, it will have to be either right at the edge of the wall or, like you said, on top of the wall.
You can put it, along your property line. It cannot be more than 150 feet away from the pool. So it can go, along the property line.
Well, if the retaining wall is at 26 feet, we could feasibly put the fence at 25 feet, such that it's 1 foot closer to the stream. And so we would have that surveyed out to locate us exactly the 25 foot, and that's maybe where it makes sense to have the fence, the retaining wall closer to the pool, away from their stream buffer, and of course the pool even further down.
Can I just add a point?
Yes, sir.
And Angela, they will, in addition to getting a pool permit, they would also need to get a fence permit.
Yes.
So
Yes.
part of what Walt is trying to do is advise you as kind of other downstream considerations for a project like this.
Are there any other additions? We're talking about a deck and a pool, a retaining wall, now fence. Are any of these steps in addition to what's already out there on the site, or any portion of the deck or patio being added in addition to the pool?
Just what's in the drawing there, what's shown as the concrete deck around it.
Right, but I don't know
Should
what's
be.
existing and what's proposed is what I'm asking.
Oh, none of that's existing.
Oh, so
it's all
none of
proposed.
it's deck or porch?
There's a wooden deck that's existing on the
Okay,
house.
okay.
And the porch exists?
And that's correct.
And the steps exist?
Yeah.
Okay, so those are all existing. Okay.
Any other questions to the applicant? Thank you very much.
Thank
You can
you.
have a seat. This time, we'd like to open the floor to public comment, is there any? As there appears to be none, you do have the opportunity to make a closing statement if you would like.
If you said yes, I would say.
There you go. Any questions to staff or council from the board?
If I may.
Yes, sir.
Angela, I know the applicant just gave us a couple letters of support to this. Do we have any letters from the neighborhood in opposition? Okay, good, thank you.
Any other questions? This time, we'd like to close the public hearing, and the floor is open for a motion.
Sorry, that's me.
So you can make a motion now, cause the ruckus.
Floor is open for a motion. Yes, sir.
All right, I'm going to make a motion for approval of V13-012. This is to allow,
Swimming pool and deck.
Here, go back
this
to
is
the
allowed to
agenda.
have a swimming pool and deck to be within the 25-foot impervious setback, as well as within 25-foot of the city's additional 25-foot buffer, making it such that the retaining wall and pool is no closer than 26 feet from the rested vegetation of the bank of the stream. The conditions are that if landscape is required by the city arborist, the applicant shall plant supplemental buffer.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second from Nancy.
What about this condition, no additional structures
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's one other.
Can I offer two amendments?
There's one other
Well,
condition
we're
too.
in discussions,
Well,
yes, you can.
There's two things I think would help everyone in this case. One is, offering a separate condition of no additional structures will be permitted. And second, to make reference to the site plan as dated 8/19/13 by Richard, by Georgia Premier Land Survey.
Georgia who?
Georgia Premier Land Surveying. That's all I see as far as reference on here, so that it's according to the site plan.
Okay.
Yes, sir?
And I'd like to make one further amendment. This is also to allow the flow wells to be installed.
That's in the site plan.
Right, but I limit them to the patio, pool, wall, and fence. I just wanted to emphasize that it also allows the flow wells.
Do I need to second that again?
We vote on each amendment.
Yeah, we vote on the minutes.
Okay.
We have a motion to add a friendly amendment, and those are, number 1, no additional structures on the property. Number 2, that it will be in accordance with the site plan dated 8/19/13 by Georgia Premier Land Surveying. And condition number 3, to allow the flow wells to be installed per the 8/19/13 Georgia Premier Land Surveying site plan as well. And did you see that in the original one?
Right,
You did or you did not?
I did. I think that the landscape architect,
Well, that wasn't an amendment, that was your original.
That was the original, right. Do we have a second on the amendments?
Yes. Make a second.
Any discussion on the amendments? So council, can I now incorporate just the whole thing into one motion? Or do we have to,
We vote on the amendment.
or we have to vote on the amendment
You
first?
at your current procedural status, have a vote on the amendment. Then you vote on the motion as it stands after whatever the result of the amendment is.
All in favor of the 3 amendments read, please raise your right hand. Opposed, same size. That passed unanimously. And the original motion was to approve the swimming pool and deck to reduce the front setback from 60 to 25 feet and the reduced,
I did not read that.
so how did you word it?
That's from something else. I have no idea what that's from. So,
I thought that's exactly what you said.
no, I didn't say it at all. I said basically to allow the encroachment of the pool deck, retaining wall,
This right here?
right.
So it is,
To allow the pool, deck, wall, fence, encroaching to that.
and
That's what
to encroach in the 50-foot stream buffer.
pervious, so that it's no closer than 26 feet from no closer than 26 feet from the rested vegetation of the stream.
26 feet from what?
The rested, W-R-E-S-T, point of vegetation of the stream.
Point of vegetation of the stream.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. And the only other thing you said, this right here.
That the landscape, city's landscape, city arborist can request additional vegetation where the buffer has been disturbed.
We have a motion and a second to approve the swimming pool and deck and fence to encroach into the 50-foot stream buffer so that it is no closer than 26 feet from the rested point of vegetation of the stream, and that the landscape architect of the city will be in charge of to mitigate for any disturbances in that area.
With the additional amendment or conditions as
With
amended.
the additional amendments already approved.
City arborist.
City arborist. All in favor, raise your right hand.
Sorry, excuse me.
Opposed, same size. It passed unanimously. Thank you. Good luck.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Number 12. 13.
Do you want these back, Angela?
Our next case is B13-013, 1565 Birmingham Highway. Angela, will you please present?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman and Counselor, I'm going to recuse myself on this particular case. The member of the applicant's family has actually worked with my family personally, and I think it's in our best interest if I recuse myself from doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You want this out right now? There you go.
Counsel, before we move on, I just want to make clear for everybody, I know Scott Reese, Brumble and Reese did all the surveying, everything from my office when I bought my building in 2000 and whatever it was. And if Counselor, if you think I need to recuse myself because of this, I'll be more than happy to do that as well. That'd be up to you all. I don't think it will make any difference on my vote, but I just wanted everybody here to know that I personally know Mr.
Okay.
Reese.
The standard is whether or not you can make an impartial decision, whether you feel like it would. So it's really a personal decision on your part. If you feel like you can make a fair and impartial decision without that weighing on it, then you can proceed.
Then I will stay. Angela, will you please present?
Yes, sir. This is V13013, 15615 Birmingham Highway. The requested variances are as follows. Eliminate required orientation of the building towards the street. Eliminate 30-foot setback from landscaping. Eliminate the 20-foot setback between buildings. Eliminate the requirements for scale of the building. Eliminate parking requirements. Eliminate requirements for building design, materials, roofs, windows, doors, and architectural features. Eliminate requirement of colors. The site is the location of the Scottsdale Farms Garden Center and Landscape Company. The 7.945 acre site is zoned AG1 and is located in the Northwest Fulton overlay. The owner, Luca Gianturco, began construction on, actually it's 9 commercial greenhouses this fall, and the construction was begun without a building permit. The City of Milton issued a stop work order, and subsequently the applicant applied for the required building permits. During the review, staff became aware that the building requirements of the Northwest Fulton overlay did not make allowances for agricultural uses such as greenhouses. A total of 9 300-square-foot greenhouses have been constructed. Section 1145 through 1147 include the following requirements for commercial buildings. All buildings shall be oriented to a public street. Buildings shall be set back no more than 30 feet from the required landscape strip or easements. Buildings within a development shall have a 20-foot separation between buildings. For every 80 feet of building length on a single face, there shall be variation on the exterior. Exterior wall material shall consist predominantly, minimum of 80%, excuse me, of a combination of clapboard, siding, brick, or stone. Permissible roofs are gable, pyramidal, and hip. Roof material shall be asphalt shingles, wood shake, or standing seam metal. Building shall have a ratio of openings, windows, and doors to solids, which ranges from 30% to 50%. No one window shall exceed 32 square feet. No grouping of windows shall exceed 100 square feet. Doors shall be wood or simulated wood or glass with divided lights. Building entryways shall have greater architectural details, including decorative columns or posts, pediments, arches, brackets, etc. And the acceptable colors are listed in Section 64-1154. The applicant, Scott Reeves, states that they do not believe it was the intent of the overlay district to preclude the construction of complementary agricultural service structures. Since the greenhouses do not comply with the above requirements, a 12-part variance is required. The Design Review Board met on December 3rd, 2013, and offered the following comments. This is an agricultural use, no issues if there are no complaints from the community, and make sure that there's no excessive night glow. Additional department comments. Staff held a focus meeting on December 10th, 2013, in which the following comments were provided. Building plan review, site plan review, DOT stormwater had no comments. The arborist who is here with us this evening stated that the applicant should provide a landscape plan showing which screens the greenhouses from Birmingham Road. Standards for consideration were read earlier, and the applicant responds as follows. Having greenhouses is a common agricultural practice which is allowed under typical agricultural zonings. Mr. Gianturco's desire and plan to build greenhouses maintains the property in agricultural use. The placement of the proposed greenhouses was dictated by existing structures, specimen trees, topography, and drainage patterns. We believe the proposed greenhouses meet the intent and spirit of the Northwest Overlay District by maintaining considerable open space and therefore maintaining the rural ambience of this section of the city. Recommended conditions. Should the board choose to approve the application, staff recommends the following conditions, and I think these are a little different from what may be on your version of the staff report. The applicant shall submit a landscape plan showing screening of the greenhouses from Birmingham Highway. The landscape plan is to be approved by the city arborist. No overflow parking is allowed on the subject site. And the applicant shall construct or contribute applicable funds for the Milton Trail. This concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you. Any questions from the board to staff?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
Angela? On that last staff recommendation of contributing to the Milton Trail, and it's kind of vague. What amount?
I don't know what the amount is. There's a formula. They can build it or they can contribute whatever amount that is that Public Works tells them.
So it's based on a standard
There's a formula,
for
yeah.
Public Works. Okay.
It's an asphalt trail. I do know that, but I don't know what the formula is.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Angela, having had experience with trails in the city so far, will any easements be required for this trail?
That's up to Public Works. I don't know if, I don't think right-of-way was dedicated when they did the land disturbance permit for the baseball field in back of the greenhouses. So that's something they'll need to discuss with.
Because what size trail is this? Is this not a 10-foot trail?
I believe it is. I know it's asphalt, and I believe it's around 10
And I
feet.
believe the right-of-way width from the center line is, at this location, is 20 feet? And is it 40 feet from the center line?
I think that's what was discussed earlier.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 20 feet, 20 feet from center line. But I just think, if anything, maybe we need to also consider just a pedestrian easement in case the trail needs to exceed the right-of-way. I think an easement is something that's easy to handle for the most part, but I'm just asking staff what they think, what would be necessary.
I mean, if it's,
It shows 25 feet from the center line is what it shows.
I guess that's up to Public Works as to exactly where the trail will go, whether it's in the right-of-way or on their property, so.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The land disturbance for the baseball field, is that actually on the same property as the subject for the greenhouse?
It's hard to say. They carved out the ball field for the use permit that they achieved that they got for the ball field, and I went to look for the LDP earlier today and I couldn't find it because our engineer had left for the day. So I don't know if this is an accurate. It's showing that it's a different piece of property, so you might want to ask the applicant that.
But it would be the same applicant that worked through and requested the LDP
Yes.
that went forward with a
Yes.
project right next to it without proper permits.
The greenhouses did not receive permits when they were built, but he did get an LDP for the ball field.
Did he follow the appropriate process for the LDP for the ball field?
What I was told earlier is the ball field, the way the property was carved out, did not have frontage on Birmingham Highway, so they couldn't. That didn't trigger the trail requirement. But this property, the way it's shown, does have frontage, so we can ask for it now.
But regardless of the trail requirement, I'm trying. This was a stop order that was issued because he didn't follow the building permit process, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to understand from a pattern. He's had recent activity on the LDP. Did he follow the appropriate process for that?
We got all that right, didn't we? The LDP for the ball field. That was as far as I know, all the procedures were followed for the ball field. He had to get a special use permit. So he did that and got the LDP.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
On the greenhouses, I just want to make sure what we're looking at. We're only approving what's on this site, this one site that does front Birmingham Highway. In other words, the way I look at it, that ball field is not on the site that we're considering.
As it's shown now, it's on a separate parcel.
Okay. And are we also approving the proposed gravel drive, or that has nothing to do with any of these variance requests?
Just these 9 greenhouses.
Okay.
The driveway is already there.
Okay, could you please repeat one more time the recommended conditions that are not on our paperwork? I just want to make sure I understand what those
Certainly.
are.
So the applicant shall submit a landscape plan that provides screening for the greenhouses from the view of Birmingham Highway. This landscape plan is to be approved by the city arborist. There should be no overflow parking from the adjacent C1 portion, no overflow parking on this AG1 piece. And then also the applicant shall construct or contribute applicable funds for the Milton Trail.
Any other questions? This time, we'd like to ask the applicant to please come forward, and if you would state your name and address, we'd certainly appreciate it.
Scott Reese with Brumlow Reese and Associates, doing business at 13685 Highway 9, Milton, Georgia 30004. I'm going to apologize right from the beginning because I'm still at a little bit of a loss, the full parameters of exactly why we're here. So I'm going to muddle through, and I'm just going to ask for your patience. Going to do a short history of kind of where we're at and how we got here, from my understanding. Sometime last year, Mr. Gianturco called the office. Scott, the property next to me is up for sale. A developer has it not under contract, but a price or purchase. And, the owners came to me, and I would like to buy it. I'd rather not have the subdivision next to me, but I want to be able, I'm going to build greenhouses, to grow plants, to sell at Scottsdale Farms. Also, one of my daughters is on the equestrian team at Berry College. I'm thinking about building a horse barn there and clear the majority of it for pasture and use the existing pastures. Responded that, those are allowable uses in agriculturally zoned property. I think you're good to go. But don't take my word for it. Let's call the city of Milton, have a meeting with staff, and get this laid out completely. So we set up a meeting, had our meeting with staff, laid out exactly what he was planning to do. More than one person was in the meeting because I said, make sure everybody. So everyone that was supposed to have a dog in the fight was in the meeting. So Mr. Gianturco proceeds, purchases the property, contracts with us. In the meeting, we were told that there would have to be grading plan, land disturbance plans for the construction. So we went through, prepared the plans, and I have the approved construction plans here. I don't know if you guys have seen those. Then in the midst of that, the community came to Mr. Gianturco, his son's baseball team. There's a lack of fields in Milton. Hey, a lot of community support. We want a baseball field. The daughter was fine. There was a possibility of another piece of property coming up that he has now purchased that he may use for the horse farm that is, again, adjacent to his property. So we then revised the grading plan and showed, instead of a horse riding arena barn site, we showed a proposed baseball field. All right, so we went through that process, and I have the signed permit copy of that plan. Went through that. In our meetings with staff, it was discovered that if anyone besides your family uses, now understand, an athletic field is allowed in agricultural zoning, but only for your family. So we then went through and created a parcel of land around the baseball field, obtained a special use permit, went through all the hearings. So we went through that process. So everything, to answer your questions, we went through the processes, everything was permitted. Now I'm kind of then at arm's length a little bit from it. The builder then takes our plans and goes and gets the applicable building permits. I really don't want to get into the necessarily, he tells me, he expressed what was, these original plans show proposed greenhouses. So it was always in that, it was never hidden anything in that. He says he went to get the proper permits he was given, and the electrical permit.
We got an underground electrical permit.
Does he need to?
Please
Yeah.
state your
Name
name,
and
state your
address.
name and address, please.
I'm David Cox. I'm a builder, lived in Milton all my life. So we got the underground electrical permit. It was inspected, passed, we covered it up. We had a gas permit, gas line permit, all that was inspected, we covered it up. I asked about the greenhouses. The greenhouse people were telling me that you don't have to have a building permit for a greenhouse because it's not a real building. It doesn't meet any building codes. I approached the building department, told them what I'd been told. They said, well, we'll have to check on it. We don't know. We'll get back with you. I said, well, if I need one, call me. I'll take care of it. Didn't hear anything, put the greenhouses up, and that was my mistake. I should have called back. But didn't hear anything. We put the greenhouses up. We got another permit for the electrical in it because I was told I would need trade permits in it. We got electrical permit for that.
But you did state these were electrical permits.
For greenhouse, right. Day one, it was greenhouse.
Not just
Right, just a permit. 'Cause
not just a temporary tie, but on that, so.
Yeah, we have to tell them what it's for. And it was for electrical permit. They came out, they inspected, they turned it down because there was a discrepancy on what fans needed to be on, ground faults and all. So electrician got with the inspector, figured out what to do. He took care of it. In the meantime, I was told I needed to have a building permit. So I applied for the building permit for the greenhouses. And then a few days later, maybe even 2 weeks later, they come out, they put a stop work order on us. And we've not done anything since then. We actually have an open ditch down next to the garden center that we've had to keep surrounded with something to keep somebody from falling in because we didn't even fill it up. So that's basically my end of it. So.
And again, I apologize that I'm disjointed, but in people that know me here, I have worked with the development community for over 25 years, and I have had clients from, oh my gosh, here they're coming in the door, lock the change drawer, to the really good guys. And Mr. Gianturco is one of the really good guys that I deal with. I don't know if any of you have been to the Scottsdale Farms, the nursery, the barn. I take people from when I have visitors from out of town, come look at this project we worked on, look at this barn. Be that as it may, I'm getting off target, but I just wanted to say that. Now that I am reading directly from the agricultural district of the Milton Ordinance. Scope and intent. The regulations set forth in this division are the AG1 district regulations. Article 9 should be consulted to determine uses and minimum standards for uses allowed by administrative or use permit. So those are outside the norm. Now these are permitted uses. Section 64-415 use regulations, permitted uses. A building or property may be used for only the following purposes. 1, single-family dwelling, which this property has. 2, agriculture, comma, general and specialized farming, comma, including horticulture, plant nursery, greenhouse, dairy farming, livestock raising, poultry raising, provided, however, that buildings used for housing animals must be at least 100 feet from all property lines. Then it goes on and goes through all the buildings that have special considerations and uses. And then accessory uses are here that just have to meet the development standards. And our permitted plans met that. Somewhere in the process, something happened, and the greenhouses are non-conforming to the agricultural district, even though this is straight printed tonight. And I understand I'm in the weeds a little bit here. We did not intend to mislead or misrepresent on anything. We thought we were going through the absolute process. We met before we started, stated what we were trying to do. We did tree surveys. We did, even in this, with agricultural use, we went above and beyond. And there's detention on this that is usually excluded from agricultural uses. Now, agricultural buildings, but we went ahead. We did everything we thought in the proper manner. We met the, located, identified the specimen trees, made sure they weren't touched, counted, did a tree survey, met the minimum requirements of the tree density for the uses. Thought we had done everything right. Now then, as far as the conditions, we're pretty well fine with enhancing the planting areas. We've talked with the arborist, Mark Law, as far as screening, if it is, we understand that a greenhouse is a building completely based upon form and function. And I swear there's not a greenhouse in the United States that is aesthetically pleasing. But neither are most hog parlors or chicken farms or buildings, but they have a specific purpose in an agricultural use, agricultural district. So, but to be a good neighbor, Mr. Gianturco has agreed to enhance the plantings. We've gone over with the city arborist to create a viewscape from Birmingham Highway to block the view of the greenhouses. So we're fine. Now, the one that has new to me in the last 20 minutes or so is the trail. And the trail, my understanding on the trail ordinance was division of property. Subdivisions, including minor subdivisions, is the trigger for the trail. And we're not subdividing, we're not changing the use, we're not asking for a special use permit or anything. We're just saying, he built greenhouses, should have gotten the building permit, something fell through the cracks. I'm sorry that happened, but this is an absolute agricultural use in an agricultural district, and what triggers the trail, I'm at a loss for. So, anyway, that concludes. I would like for Mr. Gianturco just to tell you what his intent was and what's his fun. And then, any questions? This is like my first time doing this.
Sir, please come up if you'd like and state your name and address.
My name is Luca Gianturco. I live on Antioch Place in Canton, Georgia. I'm the owner of Scottsdale Farms, and I think Scott pretty well summed it up. The greenhouses will be used for plants, and we felt like we were going through all the proper channels, doing the right things. So we were asked to come apply for a variance, which has cost me about $2,000 that I was not expecting for Scott's fees, and plus $350 for the city of Milton, and it's delayed us using my greenhouses. So I can tell you that we need to get on those greenhouses. We've got thousands of plant plugs coming, and they need a home, and they need electricity, and we need to hook up the natural gas. So we're under time crunch here. I am willing to work with Mark. We've discussed some screening material in the tree line there, but that's all I've got to say. I enjoy doing business in Milton. I think any of you that know Scottsdale Farms know what our reputation is like. We're honest. We do what we say we're going to do. And I live about 1.5 miles from the garden center. I've got 3 children, so I'm a part of this community. And if anybody wants to stand up and try to defame my character tonight behind me, I'm going to take issue with that. Okay? So I'm just asking whoever is behind me to watch what is said tonight. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, if you'll both just come back up so the board can ask you questions, we'd appreciate it. Yes, sir?
What's the future use of the balance of this land on this property and the subject site?
Horses, cows, maybe some goats.
So do you intend to take down the existing structures that are here, the residence and the
No, I do not.
shed?
No, the shed maybe is about to fall in.
Okay, do you intend to further expand your business into this area?
There are no plans other than what I just mentioned.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
There's a comment, one of the conditions requested is no overflow parking in the site. I'm not sure why that's there, but what does that, do you have a problem with no overflow parking on this site?
Well, the only, if we're stating that no overflow parking from the business of Scottsdale Farms, which is a commercially zoned piece of property, Now, if he has workers on his farm growing the greenhouses, I mean, that is a legitimate, I mean, when I have a guy feeding my cows, he parks on there, or if we're picking up hay or any legitimate agricultural practice. So I would, if it could be conditioned that, my semantics.
So no overflow customer parking?
That would
Is
be
that-
a completely legitimate condition.
We've also got 300 blueberry bushes we planted on the hill on the side of the greenhouses. And I would think if people want to pick blueberries, if they want to get closer to the blueberries instead of parking down our main parking lot, they want to park there.
Right, that's what, I would like for the conditioning to be overflow from the Scottsdale Farms Garden Center, as opposed to, if Mr. Gianturco has had in the past an organic garden on the site, and there is plans in the future to have the organic garden and the blueberry bushes. So there, as far as someone parking there to pick blueberries, I think is a legitimate use of agricultural zone property. That's completely within, but yes, it is not the intent. There's a gate up for anyone that is going to shop at Scottsdale Farms. There's parking, adequate parking provided on the commercial property. We don't want that to come over to this property.
So by using the term no customer overflow parking, is that not a good term?
That is a great term.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm trying to come up with what I'm understanding.
Yes.
And from the staff perspective, is that what your intent is as well?
Customers from the garden center and people using the field also.
Those are customers, so.
Right.
I
Then
would think-
and I'm sorry I'm interrupting, but in the process of the special use permit, there is no parking at the baseball field for that, and that is a stipulation of that use permit. So it is a violation of what we've already agreed to if that is. So if you would wish to enhance or expand your customer parking and baseball field patrons, I'm trying to be as open as I
I'll
possibly
let you police your own place. I mean, I think the intent is you just don't want, they don't want an expansion of a parking lot from the
That is-
business over into this area, I think is the intent. And I think that's the thing, if it's,
Yeah, his intent and our intent was to create a legitimate agricultural use on this property, not an expansion of the commercial end of Scottsdale Farms, but a plant growing portion of this
I understand.
farm. Okay.
Can I see your development permit plan? I would think that that's an area where
Do
they
I
work.
have to pass them to staff?
Sure.
per
Yes,
code?
Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
And the only thing I'm really looking for, that is an LDP that was permitted. You mentioned that there was something stating on their future greenhouse or
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
whatever, and then in addition, I would think that's a time in which staff wanted to look at something like trails and other things. They would typically look at something like that.
That was my
But,
understanding.
Is that just one?
none of us are perfect. I gave up that thought many years ago.
I thought I was wrong once, but I was mistaken.
Well, you get
I'm
married,
right there with you.
you get married, and you'll find out how quick you're
I mean,
wrong.
I don't break them up.
So,
No.
Okay, it's all one.
No, there's
Question
two
two.
separate. The top sheet is the revision, and then the bottom is the full plans.
December 15th, but it looks like it was revised.
That's 2011.
Yeah, but see, it was revised August 21st, 2012. So that's what I was looking at. And then you can see this was approved August 27th.
No, you're good.
Shows existing. Looks like this may have gotten cut out.
It got cut out, because that's the baseball field.
See, it shows proposed greenhouses. What are they showing here?
So this is old, 'cause this is 2012.
Well,
It is,
yeah,
it's revised.
some of them-
This is 2013.
Right.
Doesn't actually say what those are, it just shows boxes there.
Right, but this may be the,
The oldest is the original. Oh, it's still 12.
yeah. I'm trying to figure out what this shows. This just shows drainage areas, that's all this is showing. That designates a drainage basin, drainage basin,
Yeah.
drainage basin. And then these are flow calculations for those drainage basins. What they're doing is they're putting everything that gets impervious drains right into the gravel. So that's why they don't have any detention pond. Yeah. Let's go back to the front. Just want to see.
This one?
Yeah, that one. Greenhouse insurance.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
Well,
I'd like to make two comments while you guys are still available for public comment, or to comment. One is the statute you were reading applies to AG1 from a zoning standpoint. This site is also subject to the Northwest Fulton overlay, which is where there's additional stipulations, and that's why we're here tonight. So I just want to make, and that's, I'm sure, why there's people in the crowd as well. Secondly, you've emphasized numerous times, that this is AG1 agricultural. And however, the way this property is currently and proposed to be used is kind of a mix between commercial and you can even argue residential, based on the fact that you're putting greenhouses for commercial use in the adjacent property. So, emphasizing that it's agricultural would leave you to believe that it's, pasture like, cows that you've even referenced, but there's actually a commercial entity that this is supporting.
that's allowed under AG1.
And I grew up on a farm, and
That's what chicken houses are, yeah.
yeah, we produced
Commercial.
products that we sold,
Understand?
and I guess that is the commercial end of, but it was.
I'm not passing judgment, I'm just trying to
And I
clarify that this has kind of got its toe in two different,
And I guess
Uses.
I see that, and I
and
understand it.
perhaps three with the field in the back, when it comes to that special
Right,
use.
and it has been cut out, and it is a separate parcel.
Right.
Okay, and
Does the staff agree that that's the approved plan?
this is going to be the sticking point from now on, because agriculture is a commercial enterprise. I mean, it's not your grandfather, sitting chewing on a piece of grass.
No, we've been through this numerous times, this isn't our first
Okay.
rodeo on this topic.
And I'm trying to be as open. My understanding is, when I read by that, it defines the agricultural uses, and greenhouses and horticulture were expressly pointed out. I mean, like, now cotton farming was not, but greenhouses and horticulture were. And, I guess it's as far as residential, someone living on a farm, I guess that's a residential aspect of, but I mean, he is gonna put, you have to sow the grass, but there will be animals on this as soon as the grass is in permanent vegetative state. if you sow it and you put the animals on, you end up with bare ground. But, I mean, I promise you, we are not trying to pull anything in this. This is, in my understanding, an absolutely legitimate agricultural use on agriculturally zoned property. Now, is it, you know, if the problem is that you're selling an agricultural product, then I can't address or fix that. I'm sorry, you know, I raise cows, I sell the cows. You know, they train the horses. There's money exchange. They sell the horses. I mean, we're going to end up with 1 acre, 1 house, and the entire city of Milton. I mean, there is unbelievable development pressure, and that, you know, if that's the foresight, then I guess that's. But this is a legitimate agricultural use. He wanted to preserve a big tract of land instead of having, you know, 19 acres total, I think, in the separate tracts. There would probably have been, in a legitimate septic tank world, detention pond, 16, 17 new houses in there. He didn't want that. He wanted to preserve it, and that's where we are. So.
We're actually putting the land under CUBA, which is a conservation use, where we agree not to develop the land for 10 years, and then that's renewable every 10 years.
Which has to qualify under a legitimate agricultural use.
So understand, I brought this up to you because I'm sure that's what the public is thinking,
And
giving
I
you an
understand.
opportunity to speak
Yeah.
to what your intent is.
Right.
That's all.
So, I mean,
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you all very much.
thank you. We will have a closing.
You will. You have the
Yeah.
opportunity.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Can we limit them to 3 minutes? Did we ever come up with that? Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify a couple things. As far as the trail is concerned, it can be, the requirement for the trail can be triggered by either an LDP or a building permit. I don't know, I'm not familiar with the LDP that you're looking at, so I'm not exactly sure why it wasn't triggered with the ball field, but with the requirement for these building permits, this is a legitimate request. And also, as to Todd's point, I just wanted to make sure everybody understood the use is not in question. This is a legitimate commercial agriculture use on this property. That's not a problem. It's just, and I brought up the whole issue with the building permit just so you understand how we got here. It's just a matter of the Northwest Fulton overlay, which does supersede the AG1 requirements, as Todd said, does not have an exemption for things like greenhouses. So we're just here for tonight to kind of cover them and make sure he can continue with this use.
Thank you. At this time, we'd like to open the floor for public comment, and if you come forward, please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Kim Horn. I live at 415 Wade Glen Court, and I'm here to ask that you deny this request for the 12-part variance for the requested 7 requirements that the applicant is being asked to be relieved from. I understand that mistakes happen, but this seems like it's happened too many times with some similar situations in this particular case. One thing that when I was looking today at the North Fulton overlay, it talks about the need to preserve the agrarian, equestrian, and the character of the crossroads. And one of the things it talks about is the visual qualities. Taking down all the trees, even the specimen trees, doesn't preserve the visual qualities. And he's, using it for greenhouses, but the greenhouses are in effect directly tied to his business, especially if he adds people coming over to pick blueberries, which is a great idea, but then it becomes a bigger piece. And I'm not even sure if this is a piece that needs to be heard before this board today, but more of a city council issue. I know it's not a use issue, but I'm worried that if we open up the requirements and let him not have to worry about the height of the buildings and all the things that the North Fulton overlay requires, is that someday, 10 years down the road, after he sells the land, someone could put up a 10-story house. because it is AG1, they could put up a house, they could paint it purple. Because in my understanding, the zoning or the requirements and the variances would, if they were approved, would stay with the land, not with the landowner. So if you open up and allow these 7 parts, to be relieved, what's going to stop other landowners in the area to say, well, I want to, do something odd with their land, building size, materials, colors, that type of thing. The land, at least to me, doesn't look like there was any hardship. They didn't work around any trees. They didn't work around anything. And I'd be surprised if the arborist was able to look at it because they took the trees down so quickly.
There are no trees where the greenhouse is.
I think it's my turn to speak, not his. And I'm not here to insult anyone's character. And I take offense to the fact that he's making it seem like the people that want to speak are, affecting his, his character. I'm just here to say, what, the law is the law. The city has the laws. No one is above those laws. Everybody would have had to go through the same process, whatever they were doing. I would say that, do not accept these requirements. Accept the requirements and do not approve the variances. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Good evening. My name is Julie Zonner Bailey, and I live at 255 Hickory Flat Road in Milton, Georgia. And I very much appreciate the opportunity to address the Board of Zoning Appeals. I guess there's just a number of points that I'd like to make, and I'm just going to try to walk through these. And as we go through them, if you've got questions of me, by all means, please just stop me. I guess first and foremost, I think one of the most important things that the Northwest Fulton overlay, it is an ordinance, and it applies to all commercial structures within certain areas of Milton. It applies to the Birmingham character area, and the variance request before you were part of that Birmingham character area, and that is indeed why we're here this evening. It applies to the property in question. I know there's been some discussions about 7.5 acres. I would, maybe before we get done this evening, we could get some clarification from staff as to how this 7 acres is separate and distinct from the other acreage, because it is all contiguous, and I think that starts to kind of convolute some of the questions that have been raised this evening a little bit, because it's not separate and distinct businesses. They are really conjoined, if that is the correct word, because even the use of the greenhouses, if you just kind of follow the transactions, those transactions go through the conditional C1 property. It's not as though it's operating as a separate entity. So I do understand that there's conditional C1 property on which the primary business is located, but this is part of that primary business. So I do think that that's an important distinction as we think about the Northwest Fulton overlay. I think it's also really important that when we think about it, when the Board of Zoning Appeals looks at variances, it's not just this one particular business. I mean, this is the entity that's before you this evening, but it's about precedent, and it's about upholding an overlay that speaks to the long-standing expectations of an entirety of a community. And it is about property rights. It's about the property rights, though, of all citizens that are impacted by what goes on, and whether or not the overlays and ordinances of our city, our great city, I will say, are upheld. And so it's really important, because it is about upholding overlays and ordinances. And this is not the only overlay or ordinance in the city, right? There's the Northwest Fulton overlay, there's the Crabapple overlay, and when we start to set legal precedent, it starts to set some pretty dangerous wheels in motion. So that's pretty important. So I really appreciate the opportunity to voice some concerns with these variances. As noted in staff's analysis, the 300 feet of structures noted were built without a building permit. I can't speak to why that was or was not, but it was built without a permit, and the city obviously issued a stop work order. That speaks to what happened. I mean, those are the facts. A question was raised about some earlier land disturbance. There was earlier land disturbance on that parcel that ultimately resulted in the need to kind of go back and readdress the need for a special use permit. So neither the building permits nor that special use permit were done in what would be the correct chronological order of things. I'm not here to discuss why that happened. But I think that it is important for this board, as a quasi-judicial board, that you recognize that those things don't rise to the definition of hardship, because those were chosen processes. And so again, it kind of convolutes the whole issue, because one parcel is immediately contingent on the next, and one bleeds kind of over to the next because they're all right next to one another. Candidly, had the appropriate building permits been sought as required by city ordinance, several of these variances that are before you this evening would not be requested now, because the Northwest Fulton overlay would have been taken into consideration before the structure or before the construction of these greenhouses. And because it was brought up earlier, the same would have been true with regards to the baseball field. Because again, when you present a plan to the city in the correct chronological order, all those entities can review those things and identify what either meets or does not meet at the time of those particular requests. Given primary variances issued by the Board of Zoning Appeals, as you well know, because it's your board, those are typically driven by hardship, and hardship is never legally identified as a self-imposed hardship. And I would say that this evening, what's before us and before you is a self-imposed hardship, and I think from a quasi-judicial perspective, that's important to consider. Critical variances that absolutely should not be granted include the avoidance of appropriate landscaping. And I'm very pleased to hear that the applicant has talked about landscaping. I know that Mark Law, the city arborist, has mentioned the importance of that. Staff's conditions, of course, reference it. Later in my comments, I will ask that we think about much more specific landscaping requirements. The Northwest Fulton overlay is very express in what is required when you have more than 4 acres in AG1 zoned property and what's required. What's required according to the ordinance, according to the law, is 75 feet of undisturbed buffer and then an additional 10 feet. So I think as we think about a specific condition, if you were so inclined, I think that the specifics need to be part of any condition that would be read into the record. And so I'd like to share some of those thoughts again a little bit later. Later maybe is now. Let's just say under section 641141, item 3B, expressly from the Northwest Fulton overlay. And it states, landscape buffers, and specifically the Northwest Fulton overlay, legally requires, and I'm just reading directly from the language, requires for sites on more than 4 acres, which this is, a 75-foot wide undisturbed buffer with a 10-foot improvement setback, and it shall be located adjacent to all AG1 zoning districts and all property zoned used or developed for residential uses. So that law, that language that's part of the Northwest Fulton overlay clearly applies here as it relates to helping to protect the viewshed. This requirement should not be waived. It's the law. It should apply to all commercial entities, whether they be on C1 conditional land and or on AG1 land. As the number of these structures has increased, the buffers that previously were in place, again, I can't speak to the timing, but there used to be more trees in and around this property, so there was a greater buffer for the pre-existing, I shouldn't say pre-existing, but for the structures, the greenhouses that were historically put into place. Unfortunately, what happened, and you heard the applicants talk about kind of the process, is that there was additional land purchased, that additional land was cleared, apparently under the premise of a pasture, but simultaneous with that, a baseball field was under construction. Again, I'm not here to speak to how that occurred or didn't occur. I can just say that the timing of that, it was all somewhat simultaneous. And with that simultaneous clear cutting, for no other better term, whether it was for a pasture or not, it's no longer protecting the viewshed. And so it came down, those things were occurring without a proper approach to designate that buffers needed to stay in place before things became underway. And again, the overlay requires it. It's kind of the law, it's the ordinance, and the character area, the Birmingham character area that we all view as our home and have for a very long time and will for a long time. The area deserves it. It's a special place. As you may know, the city is actually drafting some new language to add to the Northwest Fulton overlay regarding the importance of viewsheds. Mark Law, our staff, your staff, they recognize the importance of keeping the natural beauty of these viewsheds. This includes Birmingham Highway. Right now, if you're going from south to north, that viewshed as it relates to these particular greenhouses, it's no longer there. So it becomes, and we heard Mr. Reese mention that, they're not attractive. That's the reality. Are they agricultural use? I'm not here to debate that or not debate it. But I am here to say that the Northwest Fulton overlay is supposed to protect those views, and no longer is it protected because it came down. And so there is now, there's 9 new, it's 300 feet of structure, so I think they're about 33,000 square feet each. So whether you consider that a building like other buildings, it still becomes a mass of building. And the reason that the Northwest Fulton overlay talks about 20 feet separation and offsets for every 80 feet is so that you don't, regardless of what you call it, so that you don't have just massive structures. And right now, visually, what's there is a bunch of massive structures. And so that deserves your consideration. Again, there is no hardship, and the Northwest Fulton overlay needs to apply in its entirety. With regard to parking, I think it's really important that we clarify parking. What's before you tonight, and I think that staff's recommendation to make sure there's no overflow parking, that's pretty critical. Again, we talked about these structures are contingent, or not contingent, they are related directly to the existing business that's on C1 conditional. So the parking that's occurring, I think now, and I think staff's had this discussion with the applicant, is that what's happening is it's not just the people that are coming to work in the greenhouses, it's employees that work at the existing C1 conditional area. They're parking in the other space. And so what happens is you end up with a sea of parking, and again, that's what the Northwest Fulton overlay expressly works to avoid. And it specifically says that the Northwest Fulton overlay requires any parking to be behind buildings and out of view. It goes on to say you cannot define it's very specific about the parking, and under section 641142 under screening and fencing, it says all parking areas shall be screened from view and from any public street, and that's just, it's not happening now. And so I think that you can't just condition parking to no customer overflow, because you also have employees that work there. So that employee parking was always intended to be part of the C1 conditional parcel. So I think it would be very important to caution against starting to create conditions now for businesses that may evolve. I mean, right now there's not a use permit before you for agricultural field picking. That might be a separate thing in the future. Again, that's not what's before you this evening. So I think what's very important with a condition tied to parking is to stick to the Northwest Fulton overlay, because those are the conditions and the variances that are before you. And again, the C1 conditional land is very specific, and that is, it does not allow for overflow parking. So I think there may be a code enforcement issue there, but I don't think that tonight is the opportunity to try to broaden earlier conditioned parcels. So I would caution, just caution the discussion around that, because this is really not an opportunity to try to deal with conditions that go far and above and beyond what was originally approved. In terms of the specificity of this parcel and the specific greenhouses, you know, if you were so inclined to approve anything, I would strongly ask that any variances be expressly defined as specific to these particular 9 structures, that it not bleed over into any other additional land that's been acquired. And I know that Mr. Fricke is here. Maybe he could help to think about what that language would be. But the risk would be that in approving broad variances to the Northwest Fulton overlay, when you have folks that, you know, and candidly, that are acquiring additional property, which is great for them, that's, you know, that's a wonderful thing. But any variance should not be allowed to then parlay into another adjacent piece of property just because it's the same landowner, because really it's not about the landowner, it's about protecting the Northwest Fulton overlay and those ordinances. And those have all been in place for a very long time, and so we're all aware of them, and everybody has to abide by them, and we would just ask that those continue to be abided by. One thing that hadn't been discussed, but it's very express in the Northwest Fulton overlay, and that has to do with lighting. And so I know that that's not a variance that's been requested, but it seems that it would need to be noted, especially because these greenhouses were not permitted in advance. I would ask that there be a consideration of a condition that just expressly kind of restates what the Northwest Fulton overlay requires, and that there's no interior or exterior lighting that would be on at night, because again, you have 300 feet of structure. Call that structure what you will, a greenhouse or not. If you light up 300 feet of building at night, you've just negatively impacted the night sky. And that's another critical component of the Birmingham character, the Northwest Fulton overlay. So I would ask that there be consideration for no interior or exterior lighting should this board proceed with any approval of any of these variances or conditions therein. With regards to building size, I did have a question for staff, just as it relates to the building separation as an example. And Ms. Rambo, I don't know if you can speak to this, and I don't have the benefit of a site plan. Do they meet the 20-foot building separation between each of these structures?
No.
Okay, and again, had this been approved by staff in advance, something like a 20-foot separation could have occurred. It may have been that maybe you would have only gotten 8 structures or maybe 7, but when you have that separation, again, the premise of that visually is so that you don't end up with what appears to be a 300-feet structure, or a warehouse, is that when you have more separation, in theory, you have a little bit of green space in between them. So I just think that that's an important point, is that when process is followed, there's an opportunity for everybody, I think, to benefit, including the applicants. So I question that separation just because it didn't seem to have been discussed expressly. With regards to landscaping and some of the staff recommendations that have been specified, if there was going to be approval of any of these, I would strongly urge that 75-foot buffer directly out of the Northwest Fulton overlay with the 10-foot additional piece of land, that be the 10-foot improvement setback be expressly noted, and that would include both hardwoods and evergreens. And of course, that would be with the approval of the arborist, but I think having that express language, since it's language directly out of the Northwest Fulton overlay, would be critical. With regards to the trigger for the trail, I would concur, as Ms. Rambo mentioned, that Milton Trail has been in place for many years, and any land disturbance is supposed to trigger that. I would ask Mr. Fricke, because it seems to have somehow been missed with the last land disturbance, is there not a way for that formula, because these are all contiguous properties and it's the same applicant, when that formula is applied, is there not a way to retroactively, maybe not through this process, but is there not a way, and should that not still be applicable with the other land disturbance on the baseball field, just since you guys raised that?
I'll certainly say, to the extent I don't have the trail ordinance in front of me, I definitely can't speak to the retroactivity. To the extent it's triggered, it should be spelled out in the ordinance as to its application, such that it applies regardless of whether the variance is issued. I understand it's a disturbance. It's triggered by the disturbance, at which time, that issue can be addressed whenever the trail requirement is triggered as a whole.
And thank you for that. And again, I just bring that up because it was raised this evening, and so I think I'd be remiss if I didn't just mention that, because I am a big supporter of the Milton Trail, as are many, many citizens. And I would also say that a lot of folks that are here this evening, that are still here and that have been waiting, have similar concerns. And I'm obviously voicing concerns on the benefit of a lot of the folks that are sitting in this audience, and appreciate the fact that you recognize that not everybody is as comfortable coming to the microphone, but they obviously are here with great concerns over undermining the Northwest Fulton overlay. So I would ask also at the Board of Zoning Appeals that when you think about the Milton Trail trigger, that if you have a condition that speaks to that, you could also have a footnote that could be reviewed by staff and the city attorney as to whether or not the Milton Trail also needed to be triggered with the prior land disturbance, because again, this parcel originally, and we heard the applicant's representative mention that it first came forward, I think, as 19 acres, and then it was going to be a pasture, it was going to be greenhouses, then it became a baseball field, and then it got separated. So at one point, it was all one, I think at the point of land disturbance. So the timing shouldn't preclude that from still going into a public fund and or from that applying. Just another question, and Mr. Law, this might be for you. In terms of tree recompense, it was my understanding that originally some of the tree removal for pasture was kind of simultaneous with the baseball field and the tree houses. and
we have given you tremendous leeway tonight because you're an ex-city council person
No,
here.
I'll just say that we actually-
Probably asking staff questions during your presentation probably isn't where you should take it. You probably should just address us and us only.
And I appreciate that.
We've allowed a lot tonight just because of who you are
Well, and
how
I would
much we appreciate you, but
I wouldn't want you to allow anything. I'm a citizen like anybody else, and I will say procedurally, the applicant was not timed. So procedurally,
we haven't discussed time, but
so and this would be true for any citizen, just as a matter of order. And I appreciate your comment. Is that my questions would be for staff, and then staff would have the opportunity, in terms of Robert's rules, to respond to those. Because this is, as a citizen, these are certain things that I don't know.
we have never, ever allowed that before.
Well, and I appreciate that, Mr. Willis. So I'll address it in this way, is that a question I would have for staff, and specifically Mark Law, would be with regards to tree recompense, because I don't understand how that's not being addressed this evening. And so, valid point, and I would ask that the board, in conversation with staff, at least consider why tree recompense perhaps had not been discussed, because I think that that's important. And that could either be a part of the buffer or not. And again, with all due respect, I want to follow every rule that there is in place. I think it was important also to hear, and I would ask you to consider this when you consider possible conditions. As I heard the applicant mention that they had the intent of putting this into a conservation use. That could be a condition, and I would ask you to consider a conservation use be a condition of any variances that be allowed. If that's the intent, then it would be readily possible to put that in. So, in summary, lots of concerns over permits being put forward or land disturbance occurring either with changed intent or without the appropriate procedure. Concerns over the Northwest Fulton overlay not being upheld. Concerns over building orientation, not so much from the street, but that it creates this large massing. Would ask that there be a condition that is very specific to that section 641141, and that it specify the 75-foot wide undisturbed buffer with the 10 feet improvement. That this also be specified to the 9 greenhouses expressly on this express land. I would also ask if there was a way to identify of the 7.5 acres, how much of the 7.5 is tied to the 9 greenhouses, because any variance shouldn't apply to the full 7.5. It should apply just to the 9 greenhouses, in my humble opinion. I would also ask that any variance that it be expressly stated would not apply to other contiguous parcels. And on parking, I'm very concerned about how the parking conditions seem to suddenly morph, because the overflow parking is a matter of the Northwest Fulton overlay and shouldn't be allowed. Whether it's for customers or employees, there shouldn't be any overflow parking, and that's a matter of existing conditions under the C1 conditional. And so to do anything other than that, I think, does take rise to something that would need to go back to the City Council if that was going to be changed. I respect each of you and what you do every night, and I appreciate your consideration. Procedurally, I would hope that I would have an opportunity and or that other citizens would have time to rebut should there be anything that we need to address. With all due respect, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? And just for your information, for the people out there, you all don't get a chance to rebut after they do, but that's just the way this is set up. So if anybody has something to say, they should say it now. They're the only people that get a chance for a rebuttal statement.
To rephrase, I'd like to reserve my last minute, because since we didn't time, typically I could reserve my time as somebody in opposition to respond. So I should have rephrased that and said I would reserve the right for a last statement to address any questions raised.
There's no reserve time to place any reserved time.
You don't, Mr. Fricke, there's typically not, you don't time?
Procedurally.
Procedurally?
No.
Okay, I guess I would ask this before I sit down. Do you have any questions? And I guess you guys always have a right.
You're not, I didn't hear any opposition in the sense of wanting denial. You want conditions.
I believe that this process is flawed. I think it's unfortunate. And I want to just say very candidly, I would never be here to speak about anybody's character. And I do think that it's extremely important that citizens always feel welcome to come to this microphone. It concerns me when I hear other citizens say that they felt uncomfortable coming to this microphone because they felt threatened. And I just think it's important. I think we're all neighbors, and I think it's important to be respectful. And I surely have respect for everybody in this room. And I would hope that we never try to discourage people from making public comment. That's what makes this country great. The freedom of speech is important, and I feel extremely blessed to be able to be a United States of America citizen. And I believe that we are grounded in making public comment. And unfortunately, not enough people feel comfortable doing it, even when it's uncomfortable. And so I just think that's important. I don't think anybody should ever feel uncomfortable in expressing their opinion, even if it's different from someone else's. So I just hope that we can continue to be a city of transparency and one that embraces everybody, even when our opinions may differ. And so, Mr. Turner, to your point, I believe that these should not have been raised as they were without permitting. I believe that they should have separation. I believe that they should meet the Northwest Fulton overlay. I don't know if it be the will of this board to approach that. If I were to say that I think they should all be denied, I do, because it was inappropriate and it's not appropriate. If you're not going to deny the variances outright, I would ask you strongly condition whatever you do decide to do. It's important. There has been a pattern, and I'm not saying that the intent was ill intent, but there's been a recent pattern, and you expressed it. The city has expressed it, obviously, in some of those stop work orders that are there. It's just really important that everybody embrace the ordinances that are in place. Again, we're all citizens, we're all neighbors. And with that, I just again will say thank you, and I understand I have no rebuttal time. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Now's the time to come. As there is none, you do have time for rebuttal.
Thank you. On the site plan, there is a distinction of lots. These, there are tax parcels that were created eons ago. He bought these separate pieces. They're expressly shown on the permitted plans, Lot 1, Lot 2. There were separate uses for those, separate permitting guidelines went through. The track 2, I'm working from memory, is specifically marked on there, land for pasture. So this, as far as addressing the particular parcels, I get if there is a concern by the board as far as specifying to where these buffers aren't granted, we're not seeking any overlap or seep. Condition it to the particular lot as shown on the approved plans. So there, that. Again, I apologize as far as somehow where the Northwest overlay, and I fully understand that this is a part of the Northwest overlay. What kicks in certain criteria, it's always been, or has been a little bit, we brought this to staff. It was approved. I'm not, if something missed in there, it was not our intent ever to bypass any rules or regulations. We went through the process. I know a single-family residence does not trigger the Northwest overlay. My understanding, certain agricultural accessory structures. I don't know if it was the understanding that if there's a primary residence, then these are accessory structures. I don't know. I'm not, whatever. We did not try to hide anything. We went through, we thought, the proper process. Those plans, as you see, that are signed by the City of Milton, have proposed greenhouses with the location where they were built, with the separations, with the setbacks. There was never any, this triggers buffers. None of that was through. I'm sorry if it's offended anyone with this use. I myself, as a lifelong resident, multi-generational, I love the pastoral views of Milton. The agricultural heritage is what I hold much more dear than the country club subdivisions. Be that as it may, that's a character flaw of mine. But this is what I feel is special about Milton and the preservation of some character, some diversity, the agricultural heritage. So that, I guess we're throwing ourselves on the mercy of the board. It was never our intent. It was never Mr. Gianturco's intent to mislead or do anything outside of the ordinance. So that being said, thank you so much for your time. And I apologize for my ramblings and dissertations. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, are there any questions to staff from the board? Yes, sir.
Just to clarify, let's say we take some motion one way or the other, but let's say if the motion did go to approve the greenhouses, would they be required to come in to get a building permit from you for these greenhouses?
They are required to come in and get a building permit for the greenhouses. They have submitted the building permit already, and it's pending this variance approval.
So if they came in for the building permit, from what you read to me, the trail requirement would kick into effect.
Right, the trail requirement
So whether we
is
put that as a condition
right,
or not,
they have to do it anyway. Right, that's
Okay.
and
I'm just
Fricke's
trying to
right.
make sure we could, if we did look at something.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, a point was made that this is for 9 greenhouses. If they came in with a 10th or 11th or 12th greenhouse, how would that be handled? Is what they're asking for to cover every type of building that could potentially be added to this building? Are we specifying, are they specifying the request just for these buildings alone?
And she can speak to what was requested. You can state it however you would like. You can make it specific to a certain number or those that are shown, or it can apply to the just any structure built on the property. It depends on the board's will.
That's what I'm concerned with, that if we did approve something beyond the overlay, I don't think the intent would be to cover other buildings necessarily. What we're trying to do is address just what's before us on a site plan.
Yeah, it was staff's intent only to cover these 9 greenhouses as shown on this piece of property. No adjoining property, no additional buildings.
I have a follow-up on that. So the best manner to do that would be to reference the site plan as we're approving what's submitted in the site plan regarding these variance requests.
That seems
That would be the best way to limit the scope of the variance.
Or
relief.
specify in your motion that it's for those 9 greenhouses.
If you word it correctly, and don't reword it 12 different times.
But is that
Walt, do you have any other questions for staff?
not necessarily for staff, but probably for the owner, but
I have some questions for staff.
Okay, go ahead and ask your questions to staff.
Can you speak to the plans that we looked at regarding the 2012 development plan approvals and
Yeah, I'm pondering these a little.
knocked off the board?
So, what I think happened is that the applicant came in and got a grading-only plan for the ball field and evidently the greenhouse area. Because if you noticed, only Jimmy Sanders' signature was on there. So I think that's what the hiccup was. The rest of the staff, I don't think, saw this, so we didn't get a chance to comment on, the screening or the building of the greenhouses or on that. Probably, well, let me look. Probably if a grading only permit is just for that, just for the grading. If he was going to put greenhouses on this property, he probably should have come back in and gotten an LDP. So that's part of the problem.
All right, so then further on down the road, they came in for electrical permits and such. At what point does that trigger, what are you using this, what are you running electrical for?
Well, I mean, we have people come in all the time and just say, I need an electrical. It's a matter of asking the right questions to the right people. So if our permit tech, like staff doesn't see electrical permits and, gas permits and all that. So if nobody knew that that's what they were for, it's saying the right thing to the right person at the right time. You can get a standalone electrical permit for, whatever.
And I have a question too. When they come in to get the building permit, will they be held to the 75-foot buffer with the 10-foot additional buffer as well?
That's another thing. This property is AG1. It's adjacent to C1 and it's adjacent to AG1. The AG1 property is not required to have a buffer. If there was any buffer, it would go onto the C1 property, and that's not an issue at this point. And
But that would be handled by the city at the building permit.
That would be handled with an LDP.
Okay.
However, if we choose to condition it as mitigation for the lack of screening, we could condition this parcel to be subject to the Northwest Fulton overlay as quasi-commercial.
Well, I think the buffer that the speaker was mentioning before was along the side property line between the AG1 and the C1, and that's actually not a requirement. You can require some kind of buffer along the frontage of Birmingham Highway for the screening.
And that was one of my additional questions. It appears that the frontage on this parcel is somewhere, I don't have an exact measurement that I can see from the drawing, but somewhere in the 400 to 500 foot range. And then the adjacent property, which is also owned by the applicant as pasture land, which is cleared, it looks like an additional 250 to 300.
Right.
So a total of 700 foot of frontage that is now exposed, meaning the greenhouses are now exposed? Okay.
And that's another thing. Having discussed this with the arborist, a buffer along Birmingham Highway may not be the best way to screen the greenhouses. He's talked to the applicant, and some plantings further back on the property may be a better screen, and that's why I wasn't really specific in the condition, because I want them to work out the best location of a screen. And that's the other thing. The property to the south,
yeah.
Since it is pasture, that also has allows some view of the greenhouses, but that's not part of this variance, so we can't condition things to adjacent property.
Correct. I understand. But you could do side yard and frontage.
Yes, anything on this property.
Yeah. All right. And then can you educate me and perhaps the rest of the board on this conservation use application process?
I'm slightly familiar with it. I'm not terribly familiar with it.
It's probably the. I mean, I'm not sure what you're looking for. Basically, a property owner will execute a legal document which says they will limit the uses to generally agricultural uses on the property for a period of 10 years, and for the benefit of doing that is that there's a severe reduction in the property valuation for property tax purposes.
Which means in doing that, that would limit them from using it for commercial use, because it's.
Well, again, that's the commercial agriculture. They can't put a shopping center on it,
Right, but could they expand Scottsdale Farms onto it as a conservation
I'd
use?
have to go back to look. I'd have to look up what the extent of. There might be some minimal, and that's where we got the discussion was as to what is an commercial agricultural use. You can farm and eventually sell the products that you grow. And I believe that I'm pretty sure that would qualify as under the CUVA statutes. But
Okay.
could they put a new, extension of the sales office, or I don't know exactly what's out there. That would likely not be an option.
And the reason I'm asking this is the applicant indicated a desire to pursue that. The public also expressed a request to condition that. However, I don't want to put the applicant in the position of making them conditioned on, and when they go through the application process, they say, well, you're using this greenhouse actually for commercial benefit of the adjacent property, and you can't get a CUVA. See what I'm saying?
All I can say, it gets into a gray area, and I have had to get opinions from the state offices as to kind of their definitions of various things, and I couldn't tell you the extent of where that gray area falls with respect to, say, a greenhouse or a blueberry picking field. As another example, I couldn't tell you without doing more research and asking some questions.
Okay, so a follow-up, if I may, to that is, I think the intent for the applicant in doing this would be clear because they would be able to lower their taxes. I understand that. But I think the intent from the public, wanting this would be to limit future development on this subject site. So if the variance request were to be approved, conditioned on this site plan, wouldn't we by effect be limiting the future development of that property based on this, or to this site plan?
It would limit the physical, a site plan is a statement of the physical conditions of the property, so you would be limiting what physically could be out there.
Right, which means additional structures,
Correct.
barns, et cetera, would all be, would
Required.
not be grandfathered in any way.
Or
They'd have to
anything
go
else
That's
through-
correct. It would
They'd have to go through
require
this
further
process.
variance.
They'd have to go through
Yep.
further variance requests.
Yes.
Okay, and thank you, that's what I wanted to make clear.
Okay.
And the last question was regarding lighting. I'm not as familiar with the actual lighting restrictions for the Northwest Fulton overlay. To address the public's concern in this matter, we've had other greenhouse concerns on this topic. Can we simply reference that the lighting shall be restricted to the Northwest Fulton overlay guidelines?
Right, that's why I didn't make it a condition, because it's a requirement they have to meet anyway.
It's already built in.
Understand, however, I think the public is looking for an abundance of caution and clarity, given what they've expressed as the history. That's all. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? To staff. Yes, sir.
Again, on the applicant's submittal of landscape plan to the city for screening of the greenhouse from Birmingham Highway, if a building permit is going to be obtained, would you not be able to ask for that during that time in which a building permit is requested?
Well, typically they're not required to submit a landscape plan as part of a building permit.
Okay, so, all right. And then, as far as uses go, is there any requirement that just because someone uses some item on one property versus another, that has to be included in that property? In other words, if the greenhouses are used in the C1 operation, does it have to be part of the C1 property? Is there any requirement that be moved from one location to the other? Could this be considered a C1 use?
No, the greenhouses are a legitimate AG1 use.
Okay.
The C1, the one thing I could clarify, the items sold on the C1 part can come from anywhere.
Okay.
If the applicant sells items on the AG1 property itself, they have to be grown on the AG1 property. That's the only hiccup there. But he can take items grown in the greenhouses and sell them on the C1 portion.
Okay. And just, again, looking at this property, it shows 9 greenhouses. It looks like they're actually grading it for as many as 11 greenhouses. And when I say 11, that would be in the same row. If that was allowed, I mean, is that something that if they wanted those additional 2, they're going to have to come back?
I would venture to say they'd have to come back.
If they
We're
condition it to
just,
the site plan.
right, we're.
Well, I understand that. I just, if I do it for 9, I do it for 11, it doesn't really matter.
Well, the variance, my staff's intent was the variance was for what's presented on the site plan now.
Okay. All right, well, I'm just trying to make sure that,
Just, I don't know if this distinction has somewhat been made or maybe needs to be further made. We're looking at orientation. It's not, we're not analyzing how many, at least in terms of the request, it's not a variance to the specific number of greenhouses that could be on there. It's not whether or not you can even have a greenhouse. It really goes to the orientation, the spacing, the construction, and those sort of issues. The way the number has come up is whether or not you want to say you're giving a variance limited to only 9 and only as to the 9 that are shown on here.
Right.
If that's the way it's worded.
exactly, that's the point I was trying to make.
So if they
we-
put another, if they only got it for 9, as shown on here, theoretically, they could build I don't know that would necessarily be a greenhouse if they use the correct structures, but build a structure that complies with these codes on the property, but it would have to comply with the setbacks and all those things. So
So whether it's 9 or 11, if it was site-specific where it only shows 9, and we only approved it for 9, then they could not expand the
Without coming back
2 or
here.
3 others if they wanted to. So, because I'm just trying to make sure, you know, what I really hope is that staff cleans up the overlay district to allow things like this.
We're
If that's the true
looking into it.
intent. And, you know, I think there's also an issue with, you know, we had a riding ring that wanted to go in this same overlay district, and for some reason, because of the size, it was limited, and I felt like that was a very good use we could have had in this community that would have been a real attribute, and that's another one that I would love to have had an option to consider. But anyway,
Any other questions to staff from the board? At this time, we'd like to close the public hearing, and the floor is open for a motion.
Can I ask a question?
Sure,
internally?
go right ahead.
Just internally.
Sure.
I haven't been out to the site. Have you guys been out to the site? So when you're on Birmingham Highway, how much of the greenhouses have already been built? Can you see?
they're all built.
No, but I mean, how many can you see? That's the question. Can you see them at all? You can. Is it
During this time of year, you can.
this time of year?
I don't know how much you'd see. It's hard to tell.
Yeah.
You got some pictures.
They're white and
right there.
300 foot long, so.
Yeah.
My
Yeah, I can't see them in the pictures.
color printer wasn't
Right
I can't see them.
cooperating, so it's a little
Yeah,
hard
but the
to.
view from
Oh, from
Birmingham,
the from the
Birmingham
yeah.
Highway, I can't see them.
Um,
You- Can you see them? You barely see them?
It's right there.
Okay.
There's the existing house, it's this house. But see, you've got a barn you gotta look through.
Yeah.
You've
Okay.
got the
All right.
shed, but it's right through here.
Right.
It's
It's
where-
a long way.
Yeah, there you go.
these are the greenhouses.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
It's 8
Not
feet
that
higher.
obtrusive then. Okay. Thank you.
That's the best picture I could get.
All right.
without getting
Thank you.
over.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela.
Did you want- So these are the-
Thank you.
So you guys have your conditions?
Floor is open for a motion.
That's on there. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Seems like I take the hard ones on. I'm gonna recommend approval of V 13-013. This is to allow for these 9 greenhouses, the elimination of the required orientation of the buildings towards the street, the elimination of the 30-foot setback from landscaping, the elimination of the 20-foot setback between buildings, the elimination of requirements of scale of buildings, eliminate parking windows, doors, and architectural features, section 64-1146. Eliminate requirements of color, section 64-1147. This is, again, to allow 9 greenhouses on this site based on variance exhibit for Lucha, and I'm going to... Gianturco, dated October 31st, 2013 by Brumbelow and Reese, with the following variance conditions. The applicant shall obtain a building permit for the 9 greenhouses. The greenhouses shall be screened from view of Birmingham Highway, a landscape plan to be approved by the city arborist. No overflow customer parking on this site. And I believe
No, we need to add that one.
Contribute to
applicant to submit a landscape plan to the city arborist for screening of the greenhouses from Birmingham Highway.
You already did that.
That's right.
Well, what about the
I did.
Milton Trail? Well, that's already covered.
That's
already
covered, that's covered under the building permit.
Yeah.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Any discussion?
I'd like to discuss the parking aspect. It's been expressed that this is a current issue with employees parking, and you can imagine that it could be a scattered about, no rhyme or reason on an open field. The applicant has stated that he's looking at blueberry patches, which could present additional, although issues that would not necessarily be, maybe deemed not customer, because this is an AG1 use and not a commercial use. So all right. And then we've got this baseball field in the rear, which has already been restricted to parking. And I just think it would be best just to leave with staff's original recommendation of no overflow parking and make it crystal clear.
The only reason I clarified customer parking, and again, you know, if I have people working for me and they're parking somewhere, I don't think they're parking for anything but convenience, picking up items, bringing out items, taking care of items. And that's why I wasn't addressing a customer, an employee issue, but just a customer issue. And as far as, you know, them allowing parking for this blueberry patch, I really wasn't looking for them to do that. And I did not address the ball field, because again, I think they've got parking elsewhere. You know, I can add, you know, no ball field parking, but again, I think I'm just getting too far out on what can or can't do, but you know, when somebody asks me for overflow parking, to me that talks to me about this business, not about the ball field. And that's why I kind of said that. So I felt like when they mentioned overflow, they were talking about the business operation. So that's why I clarified that with customer, not ball field, not anything else. Now, how the city would interpret if it's, you know, people parking there for the ball field, I don't know. And would they really get involved with that? And really, would I care? I don't know.
What if you find yourself in a situation where you've got trucks servicing the business that are parked on this property? That would be...
That's okay. That's
Yeah,
not a
but
customer.
I don't think that, what we've heard from the public, I don't think that would be what they would like to see.
But the business trucks or whatever would be screened from the road, so who cares? I mean, if they had a tractor parked there next to it because they took down the front face of the greenhouse and had to bring soil materials in and amendments and left the truck parked there overnight,
I think that's
I
what we
don't
want to
want to. I don't
avoid.
want to nitpick operations to such an extent that I think the main thing when they told me overflow, I knew that referred to the business, and that was not. That's why I put the word customer, because I felt, and I don't know if I did that wrong or right, but when I mentioned that to you during the questioning to staff, I said, you know, if I added customer parking, would that be appropriate? I think the response back was, I think so.
Well, let me ask the question
Sure.
another way. Would it be too limiting to not have parking on the site? Would it be too limiting to the applicant?
I
I think so.
Yeah,
For commercial parking, for an agricultural use.
but, you're saying no parking, I mean, people are gonna park trucks and
Yeah,
I
they
mean-
have to bring material.
they have to bring
But
material.
this
They gotta
isn't, but
bring-
they don't have to bring material to service those greenhouses, is what I'm saying.
They do.
That's
They-
all serviced from the backside of the commercial entity.
They're gonna have to drive out there when they park that car to get out to load it up, because they gotta load all the pallets of seedlings out and hopefully
Right, they do all that
plants.
from the backside of the commercial property.
No,
That's
they
where all their
can't.
access is for the greenhouse. It's
They
not
have-
from driving through the pasture.
No, I'm not saying I agree that but still, when they park in front of it, that gravel driveway's in front of those units. They're not parking on the C1 property, they're parking in front of the greenhouses to load and unload.
So Todd, as part of your issue, how do you segregate commercial parking from baseball parking from other types of parking?
Yeah, I just think any commercial
How do you
parking on this
control it?
property is gonna be problematic for the people who have to live there, and it would not be screened.
But we heard from staff, commercial use of a greenhouse is allowed in agricultural use. And which case, that means commercial parking.
Right, so
or
you imagine a bunch of pine
servicing.
straw trailers and whatnot be backed up in here? How would you like that? If you
I don't
live in
think
the
you would see
Northwest
it.
Fulton
I
overlay.
don't think you would see it. I don't.
But to make it real clear, so that I can guarantee you won't see it if we put that restriction in. That way they don't have to think about it.
I let others talk. I kind of made my, I don't want to.
I don't think we're being overly restrictive by saying no overflow parking, period. That doesn't restrict them from having residents parking there, periodic use for, tractors to tend to the pasture, but to prohibit commercial parking on here, I think is what the overlay district would expect.
But when you use the term overflow, what are you overflowing from? That was staff's word, overflow.
Then we can just simply say commercial parking, no commercial parking.
They said overflow.
I think staff's intent was what we were describing.
If they did, then they would have said no commercial parking. They said no overflow.
Okay, regardless of what staff says, what I'm heard from public is they're concerned about the commercial nature of this and the lack of screening. We're not putting any protections in here for that with respect to parking. I think it's as simple as saying no commercial and customer parking on the subject property.
Well, again, what happened is, the staff said we can use commercially these greenhouses, even though it's on AG1 property, for that use on C1. So that means to me, then, on occasion, there might be commercial trucks. Listen, I've looked at that operation. I don't know how many times you've been out there.
Oh, I've been out there.
I've been out 3 or 4 times just to kind of peruse, without them even knowing it, just to kind of walk around. And I don't see an operation like that. But, you're right, change of ownership, a number of things can happen. But I think, again, we've got the screening occurring that I think that will really protect us. And I understand your concern. I'm by no means belittling it. I'm just trying to address like the staff recommended, and they said overflow, and I try to just clarify it.
So I'll say my final point and then I'll leave it. There's a loading area, if you look on the site plan, which is adjacent to the greenhouses, which provides him ample access and commercial use of those greenhouses, such that it's not an undue burden on the applicant, and it meets the community's intent of not having the eyesore on that property.
Again, I've gone to the greenhouse operation that the Orchid Man grows at the corner of Red Road and Birmingham Highway, Freemanville Road. I don't know if you've been out there or not. But on occasion, when they go in and redo their medium and everything else, they physically pull trucks all the way in underneath those greenhouses and load things up and pull things out and do things. And
That's in the process of loading and unloading. That's not parking.
Well, parking to me is parking. You get out of the car and you turn it off. It's parking.
Parking could turn into storage is what I'm trying to
Oh, you-
protect against.
You mean storage of?
Storage trailers for the commercial.
Okay,
AG1 allows
okay,
it.
what-
AG1 allows it. You could put 14 hay trucks out here to store hay. you could do,
Guess it's not a shopping center.
all we're trying to do is say, this is not to be used for customer parking. That's what I heard.
Okay.
And,
So I'll offer a friendly amendment, and we'll take a vote on that and go
Sure.
from there.
Sure.
The friendly amendment that I would offer is that we change the parking clause to cover that there will be no customer or commercial parking overnight or during the day permitted on the property.
Say that again.
No
To amend it?
commercial or customer parking.
No commercial.
Can I, and I don't want to assume anything. We're dancing around perhaps that when we're saying customer parking, we're saying customers of the adjacent property's business.
If you'd like that to be clearer, then.
On this one, I think as clear as possible, whatever the intent is, as clear as possible, is going to be important.
Okay, so the amendment would be no commercial or customer parking pertaining to the adjacent C1 property shall be permitted.
Pertaining to adjacent what? C1 property
C1 property,
overnight?
right. Well, get rid of the overnight, forget that, just, there's no parking is permitted pertaining to the commercial or customer parking for the adjacent C1 property.
Pertaining to the adjacent C1 property.
Northern.
Northern C1 property?
Correct, that's even better.
Mr. Chair, I did want to clarify one thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Parking, as it relates to the agricultural use of that piece of property, what goes on that piece of property is allowed. So they can bring in, a backhoe or.
Right, and that's why I wanted to be clear that this condition relates to parking, as you've clarified it now. You're saying parking from the adjacent C1 property won't be allowed on this property, commercial or customer, is the way you.
Property.
Right.
And that, it was,
That's
well,
the baseball field.
right, the baseball field was already,
That's
that
already
parking
been
was
addressed.
covered in the special use permit. I think it was staff's intent that customers from the C1 property were not parking on this AG1 piece.
Correct.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? I'll second it for discussion. Any discussion?
I've kind of made my point. I don't mind amending mine to, clarify customer parking, but again, I just look at AG1 property and look at the number of farms I've been to, and there's all kind of commercial parking. I've got friends of mine who have stables. I've got friends of mine who have kennels on AG1 property. I've got friends of mine who have pottery kilns that they bring equipment and people in and customers and all throughout the city, and I just kind of cringe at over regulating what we're concerned with. I think if we're looking at it, I think you're well within your rights for the overflow parking for the northern commercial property, but to add commercial, I just feel very uncomfortable with that. And I think if we screen it properly, if Mark does the job that I know he's capable of doing, and heck, we're working with a landscaper, by golly, if they can't figure out plant material to do a good job screening, I don't know who does. I think we'll get it worked out, and there won't be a problem with what you see or look at. I have faith in the group I'm working with, and that's kind of my position.
Well, we have 700 feet of frontage that we are needing to protect.
They got
And the only restriction is that they're allowed, as staff clarified, they're allowed to have commercial activity on the property as it pertains to that property. But what we're trying to restrict is the customer and commercial use of the adjacent C1 property, not bleeding over into this property. That's all that amendment addresses.
That's right.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Nancy?
No, I was just,
You sure?
yeah, I'm fine.
So we have a friendly amendment to change the original parking statement to no commercial or customer parking pertaining to the adjacent northern C1 property. All in favor of passing the friendly amendment, raise your right hand. Opposed? It passed 4-1. Now, we have amendment on the table to approve 9 greenhouses to eliminate the required orientation of buildings toward the street, to eliminate the 30-foot setback from landscaping, to eliminate the 20-foot setback between buildings, to eliminate the requirements for scale of the buildings, to eliminate parking requirements, to eliminate the requirements for building design, materials, roofs, windows, doors, and architectural features from section 64-1146, to eliminate the requirement of colors, section 64-1147, and all these 9 greenhouses on this site are based on the variance exhibit for Luca Gianturco, dated 10/31/13 by Brumbelow and Reese, with the following conditions. The applicant shall obtain building permits for these 9 greenhouses. The greenhouses shall be screened from view of Birmingham Highway, landscape plan to be approved by the city arborist. No over...
Scratch that.
Okay, and we've already done that, and that would be it.
Just to be clear, the final condition as amended by the last
Correct.
Vote.
That is correct. All in favor of approval, raise your right hand. Opposed, same side. Passed unanimously. Good luck.
Thank you.
My plans.
I think we give them back to staff.
We sold them. Let me tell Christopher to come back.
Oh. We have one more.
That gave me a headache.
Did you say we were going to be in out of here? Your last words.
B13-014. Angela, will you please present? Oh, hang on just a second.
Yeah, we're gonna
I
grab
told
Chris.
Christopher to come back, but let's give him a second to make it back.
I think he's all by himself.
I don't
think you're all
we
by
don't have
yourself.
014.
She has to read it yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but we don't have a copy of
We
it.
don't have 014.
No, we're not doing 15.
Oh,
Are we doing 15?
Well, it's on the agenda, so what do we have to do with
we
it?
got to defer it.
Julie?
Is there a 15?
I haven't.
I thought I had a 15.
It's on the revised
Here it is.
agenda, I'm sorry, I'm not, that's
heavily
the
conditioned.
original one.
Parking.
So are we deferring
Parking on the
14?
property,
Yes.
subject to screening according to
And what is the reason?
arborist.
Angela, will you please
Specific to the
present?
Site plan, can't do any other development.
14, yes, we need to vote on that. Mr. Chair, staff would like to request a deferral on fee 13014, and, I'm sorry, it reflects that intent on the revised agenda. The applicant is still working with the city to clarify the exact location of the lake, and staff wants a more specific, more detailed development plan from the applicant before we bring it before the board. So we want to know exactly what's being built and exactly what they need.
Thank you. Any questions to staff? Do we have a motion to defer?
I have a motion to defer V13-014, 980 Mayfield Road, the Lakes at Mayfield, planners and engineers, Christie Tran, requests to the next meeting.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? We have a motion and a second to defer V13-014 to the January 2014 meeting. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same side. Passed unanimously.
She brought that up. She did on
On the next one.
V13-015. Angela, will you please present?
it. I understand.
The site 12725 New Providence Road is Lot 2 of a proposed three-lot subdivision zoned AG1 located in the Northwest Fulton overlay. Lot 2 is 2.37 acres of the total 6.57 acre subdivision. The subdivision consists of 3 flag lots with a shared driveway off New Providence Road. The houses will face the proposed shared driveway. And in his letter of appeal, Martin Anker, a representative of Highland Communities, states that topography, stream buffers, and soil conditions on the property limits the options of dividing the property in a way that would support septic tank systems for each lot and still allowing one shared driveway. Section 6477.3 states that measurements for a front yard setback shall begin at the point of intersection of the stem and the flag portion of the flag lot running along the property line that is most perpendicular to the stem. The houses will face what is actually the side yard. The 50-foot front yard, which is on the left, and the 60-foot rear yard on the right will constrict the area available for the house. The applicant states that reducing the front and rear setbacks to 25 feet will allow enough room for the proposed houses. Section 64.416B and D states that the minimum front yard and rear yard are 50 feet and 60 feet respectively. Since the applicant proposes to reduce these setbacks, a variance is required. Note from staff. Staff is working on a revision to the Northwest Fulton overlay that will require a 60-foot undisturbed area adjacent to major roads such as New Providence Road. This will help with the preservation of the natural view sheds of the area. Where sparsely vegetated, they will be required to replant in a natural fashion per the approval of the city arborist. A landscape plan will be submitted to the arborist for the preservation of the rural view shed. Architectural elevations for Lot 1, fronting New Providence Road, will be viewed and approved by staff prior to the issuance of a building permit. While staff cannot require these items to become conditions of approval of the variance of Lot 2, we ask that the applicant voluntarily comply with these in order to assure a smooth transition from undeveloped to developed property. Design Review Board courtesy review occurred on December 3rd, 2013, and the following comments were offered. Provide a 60-foot undisturbed area along New Providence Road, or sparsely vegetated, replant in a natural fashion per the approval of the city arborist. Submit a landscape plan to the arborist for the preservation of the rural view shed. Architectural elevations for Lot 1 fronting New Providence Road shall be reviewed and approved by the staff prior to the issuance of the building permit. And I just wanted to note that DRB didn't realize that they weren't able to make these conditions. They didn't realize that we were talking about separate lots. Additional department comments from a focus meeting held on December 10th, 2013. Building plan review, site plan review, arborist, and DOT stormwater had no comments. Standards for consideration were read earlier, and the application and the applicant, responds as follows. Due to the topography, soil condition, and stream buffers, we are limited in how we are able to lay out this site without compromising one of these critical factors. That said, these lots are in a flag configuration and subsequently are required by the code to have 60-foot front setbacks and 50-foot rear setbacks, and the fronts and sides are being determined by their orientation to the main road and not the shared driveway. We are able to accommodate these setbacks on lots 1 and 3. Pertaining specifically to Lot 2, we are confined by a plume of soils unsuitable for septic in the middle of the rear lot, front to back downslope topography, and also by stream buffers in the back of the lot. And this is shown on the topo map. We believe that the variance would not offend the spirit of the ordinance, cause any detriment to surrounding properties, nor interfere with public safety, health, or welfare. Recommended conditions. Should the board choose to approve the application, staff recommends the following conditions. Staff has no conditions at this time. This concludes the staff presentation.
Any questions to staff from the board?
I have one.
Yes, sir.
That's proposed, hasn't been signed off yet.
So, Angela,
Yes.
as far as this Northwest Fulton overlay and the buffer, are you, in your comments, are you essentially concurring with the Design Review Board's request for sparsely vegetated areas to be replanted for the City of Everest approval?
Yes.
Although you haven't listed that as a condition.
Well, the variance is specifically for Lot
Lot
2, and their frontage is on Lot 1, so I can't put a requirement on Lot 1, but, you know,
But these are all undeveloped sites owned by
Correct.
the same developer at this
Correct.
point? Okay.
well, that's true. At this point, the final plat has not been approved, so, I mean, I don't know how we...
Good terms. What do you want, Walt Iliagnis?
For the proposed final
No.
plat?
I'm getting funky now. I want leather leaf,
Proposed.
spiry.
We have a history on Iliagnis.
What is that?
Yeah.
Leather leaf. You show you.
You don't want to know.
Oh, yeah, I mean, they have to look just like that.
Yeah, she wasn't happy with him.
You know what, Gary, but you were right.
You did the right thing.
She should,
Yeah, I mean, I haven't asked one question. I mean, when she started asking
They'd have
all
to
the time, I
plat
thought,
it,
no, come on.
get the variance,
Yeah.
and then revise it.
If she gets mad, she gets
I
mad.
guess they didn't
and,
want
and the
to
funniest
go through
was
revision.
about, you said there's no rebuttal.
Because, I mean, you can do that for like a CUP, you can reduce.
That's
Tape, aren't we?
What,
Are we on tape?
They're determining the final plat
They're trying to
situation.
figure, yeah, before you do anything.
Right. Oh, no, well, yeah. as shown on the proposed.
no, you didn't answer my question, but I should have. I was back there with the cops, hanging out, they were having dinner.
Oh, my Lord. You had dinner?
Huh?
You had dinner?
No, they didn't.
All right. So
Hi, you back?
you get paid by
Basically,
the hour.
we would have to tie it to the variance submittal as shown, because we have not done a final plat yet. And so if they change anything, they'd have to come back. That's what that discussion was.
So, tell me what we're supposed to.
So.
Well,
let's
this is
restart
the
here.
situation. We have one large tract, which is the subject of the application. However, they're only seeking a variance with respect to what they have called Lot 2. Lot 2 is not a formal platted lot within the city yet. You can word a variance appropriately, given that we have a drawing. I assume it's surveyed, and we have meets and bounds, which from which we could determine, because we're talking about setbacks from property lines.
Yeah, it's surveyed and dated.
We could do that. And then that's in my opinion, that's the only way that you can distinguish what your variance is, because you're talking about setbacks from particular lines as shown. If for any reason when they go to plat this minor 3-lot subdivision, they move those lines, the variance isn't going to apply to those new lines
Because it won't meet.
because it won't be drawn. So I don't know if the applicant, if they're comfortable this is absolutely where it's going to go, and they're comfortable the city's going to approve, and that there's no issues, then it won't be a problem.
Okay. Glad I asked up front.
But if they foresee any reason that those lines might change, then the variance, my anticipation is the variance would not apply to the new plat, the new lot.
Yeah.
And as for
We understand that.
the setback, I guess I just wanted kind of a verbal understanding from the applicant that he would be willing to do that, because I can't force him to do that through this variance.
But we can't force them.
We can condition it, is what I heard.
It's not, that condition would not be on Lot 2.
I think
You
you
condition
can.
that according to the final
I'm sorry. I
plat
think you were
submittal,
talking about
we'll have to include
landscaping.
that.
Right.
You can create a landscaping requirement
On another lot.
on Lot 2. On the way I understand it, this is one lot. This applies to
Well, today,
the
yes.
full.
So we would have to say something like, upon final plat submittal, the applicant would be required to submit a landscape plan that is consistent with the Northwest Fulton overlay for the adjacent area bordering New Providence.
And I'm not sure to answer. You can the way I understand this variance is submitted for. There is only one. Hang on, let me get the lot sizes. How many acres do we have here? How many acres is the total lot?
2, 4, 6, 7, 7 acres.
Okay, so we've got a 7-acre lot parcel, which they are talking about subdividing into 3 lots, and
I thought it was 6.
I think the variance applies to, at this point in time, there is no Lot 2 or Lot 1 or Lot 3 to which we're talking about. However, you can say you can build on this sliver as shown on this lot with these setback requirements allowed. You can, I would say, also condition the front of this 7-acre lot. However, as I said,
If it changes.
if those lines change, your variance won't necessarily apply, and what they build may not fit within, or what they want to build may not fit. It's not. I don't think you're giving a wandering variance.
Yeah, wandering approval.
At least I would recommend against any sort of wandering variance because I don't want to try and.
I understand.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad the applicant heard all that before he presents.
If that's the case, the staff would like to make that
Any other questions
area
for
its
staff
recommendation.
from the board?
I do have one other question. Is there any reason why staff wouldn't recommend deferral until the final plat was actually submitted?
Well, our thoughts were we wanted to have everything clean and figured out prior to final platting. That way, if we did it the other way, you'd have to plat it, get the variance, then revise the plat. This
Gotcha.
way, everything's
Okay, so we're actually
figured
not
out up
cart before
front.
the horse. You're trying to give him some guidance in which to go for final plat.
And because if that, I think in conversation with him, he said if he can't, that may affect his number of lots.
Understand.
And his layout altogether.
If you would state your name and address and then present, we'd certainly appreciate it.
I do.
Where are you planning?
Well, good evening.
Good evening.
It's been a fun evening.
There won't be any public comment, that's for sure.
That's good. I guess that's safe. I'm Marty Aker. I'm with Highland Communities. We've owned this site for about a year, and my address is 4045 St. Michelle Lane in Alpharetta. We bought this site. We had looked at some different configurations on it initially. We then went and did the soils analysis, looked at the topography, looked at the stream buffers, and decided that this was ideally suited for larger lots. So we didn't try to cram as many lots in there as we could. As I said in my letter, the topography, the plume of unsuitable soil for septic in the middle of the site, and the stream buffers running along both sides of the property caused us to think that this really is better to have 2-acre lots, 2.3-acre lots. When we laid it out, we found that the lot in the middle, well, I guess the first thing we discovered was that when we laid it out with the 3-lot configuration, we ended up in this flag lot code, which we hadn't anticipated. So our first layout was a little bit different with the setbacks, where we were looking at placing the houses perpendicular to New Providence Road rather than parallel with New Providence Road. We then realized that we were in this flag lot condition, and we looked at it. The size of the lots will allow us to accommodate the flag lot setbacks, even though it's not going to be front and back, it's going to be side to side. We can do that on lots 1 and 3, but because of the shape of lot 2, where it's located in that plume of soils there, limits us with our septic installation. We were a little squeezed, so those 3 things kind of came into play there. So we looked at it and we said if we could get a 25-foot, what in actuality is going to be a side setback, technically I guess front and back setback, that would allow us to get an appropriate sized house on a 2.3 acre lot. It still provides for 25 feet plus 60 feet on one side, 85 feet between the houses minimum, and 75 feet on the other side. So good distance between the houses. It's going to have a very low density feel to it, and it's a beautiful site. We're very excited about it. And to address the issue about the landscaping, the frontage along New Providence, if you look at the site plan there, we've got this lot 1, we showed the 60-foot building line here off of the right-of-way. We anticipate the house really being positioned kind of this way, facing into the shared driveway, as we said earlier. So our plan all along has been to do a nice entryway with nice landscaping that will be commensurate for this kind of small neighborhood. So we're in agreement. We want it to look nice. I'm a little bit concerned about calling it an undisturbed buffer because we're going to disturb it and put plantings in it and make it pretty. You know, to do that, I think according to the plan with the arborist. And we also talked about the elevation on lot 1, running it by the city architect to make sure that the view shed, love that word, view shed, that the view shed is good, you know, coming off of New Providence, and that his concern was about looking at the back of a structure or something that wasn't so pretty. So we agreed that we'll provide an attractive elevation on the front of this house and a dressed up landscaping package there along New Providence. So it's in our interest, it's in the city's interest, so we would have done that anyway.
Questions to the applicant from the board? Yes, sir.
Can I guess, can you go back to the original where you have the homes shown on there? I want to make sure we have the right understanding of front, side, and rear, given the flag nature of these. And our drawing is so small, I can't even read what that hashed area is that's going into the house in Lot 2.
Right. So these would be the 25-foot setbacks here on Lot 2. The front of the house would face into the shared driveway.
Mm-hmm.
So front of the house into the driveway, front of the house into the driveway.
Okay, so from a visual standpoint, they're actually side setbacks, but based on the flag lot nature, they're front and rear.
Right.
Got you. All right, that's what I needed clarification. And so that hashed area going into the home, is that a swell? What is that?
That's a driveway, proposed
No,
driveway.
No,
on
the
the-
hashed
on the
area in
bottom
the
side.
backyard.
Coming out of the back of the house, yes,
Yeah.
sir.
That's the soils unsuitable for septic. That's from our soils engineer.
Okay.
They
Gotcha.
overlaid that, so I could show you the plume of bad soil that's back here. So
Okay.
that's also limiting as far as septic.
Okay.
And is
Perfect.
it heavily wooded on the back? Those lots?
Along both sides, both property lines back here, it is beautifully wooded. Other than that, this is mostly pasture. It's already been cleared.
No complaints from the neighbors?
No.
Yeah.
But there are no neighbors today. They're,
There are on the back.
Water side
Yes,
is
water
back
side's
here.
back there.
okay.
So just to clarify, you're fine with there being a provision along New Providence Road to replant in a natural fashion per the city arborist?
Really?
I didn't call it undisturbed, by the way.
Right.
I dropped that word. You're okay with that?
Yeah, I think if we'll come up with a landscape plan that we all agree on that is appropriate for the look of the streetscape and the right materials. We also, obviously we want to screen this for our residents as well.
Sure. Right.
Fairly busy road, so we're going to put in some pretty good sized material.
The city arborist left, but Angela, maybe you can answer. Is he prohibited in any way from putting a berm along there to raise and change the elevation?
We actually don't want berms.
Okay.
We want to
You
keep
can deal with that.
Thank goodness it's time.
I cannot believe that.
gasp. Yeah. We want to keep it. We want to keep the front looking as much. We want to preserve as much of the good stuff as we can, basically.
The septic tank,
I'm good.
are they in the
Okay,
right
thank you.
spot?
Any other
People want
questions
pools?
to the applicant from the board? Since there's no public comment, you are allowed to make a closing statement or anything you'd like to say. If not, that's okay too.
No, thank you. It's pretty straightforward. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Any questions to staff from the board? This time I'd like to close the public hearing and the floor is open for a motion.
I have a motion that we approve V13-015 to allow reduced front setback from 60 feet to 25 feet on Lot 2, to reduce rear setback from 50 feet to 25 feet on Lot 2, subject to no conditions.
Per site plan.
Per site plan.
Per the site plan. submitted.
Per site plan submitted.
And can I have a date on that? What is it?
I can't read it.
What's the date on your site plan? We can't see it so small.
Seven 1/13, is that right? 7/10.
And I just want to be clear, when you,
What is
that
it?
the Lot 2 as shown on that site plan that you just referenced.
Lot
Correct.
2, as shown.
So this variance would only apply to
Okay.
the house on Lot 2.
Project.
Yeah.
And that's Ridge Planning and Engineering.
Can we still get a date though?
We just did a preliminary with our engineer, so when we submit for the final plan.
Okay, all right.
Why don't, if you can make it, if we can put it part of the record, if you can choose whichever one you're referring to, we'll attach it to the minutes.
I think it's
From our
7/10/13.
That's what I think.
Well,
that's it.
just say the.
Submit it per our packet.
Yeah, submit it, the lot plan
Per our
that
packet.
was submitted.
For the petition.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion. We have a motion and a second to approve V13005 to reduce the front setback from 60 feet to 25 feet on Lot 2, to reduce the rear setback from 50 feet to 25 feet on Lot 2. And this will be Lot 2 as shown on the plan submitted per our packet. Does that work, Counselor?
That works, and I want to, when he read it, I'm not sure if this crossed my mind. There's no specific site plan required. The house does not need to be located per the site plan, it's just Lot 2 as shown, or did you intend the house to be
No, I
located?
meant to say Lot 2 is shown on plan submitted.
Okay, I just want to be
Not the
clear.
structure itself.
Right.
The structure can wind up anywhere.
Yes, sir.
That's what I understood it to read.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that was clear. And there were no conditions? Okay, thank you.
All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good
Good
luck.
luck.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Thanks for
Thank
following
you.
the process.
We should have let you go first.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Is 3 hours the record?
Angela, Counselor, any new business, any old business?
Yes, sir. I have the 2014 meeting calendar here. I can pass it around if you all would like to see it, but I would like to get your vote on it. We meet the third Tuesday of each month, and according to this calendar, there are no conflicts or anything. Anybody can think of any?
No, ma'am.
So I would like, if we can get a vote to approve the calendar. would be
We need a
lovely.
motion, yes, sir?
Make a motion to approve the 2014 meeting calendar as submitted by staff.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the 2014 meeting schedule, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign, unanimous. Anything else?
Anonymous.
Do we have to vote for your chairmanship again?
Next month.
Well,
Is that
we
next month?
can't, we don't know if we're even appointed.
Yeah, we don't even know if
Once
we're even
you
back
all
on.
are
Oh, okay.
There's 4 of us that
re-sworn
haven't even
in
been.
and all of that.
Yeah,
What?
us 4,
Yeah.
right
Oh,
here.
good.
Well, you haven't been asked, have you? I heard there's talk.
There's all
That's
kinds
right.
of
You
talk.
guys-
You guys sweated out through the whole holiday.
Yeah, we won't even know.
You might like it.
Because if, are we off the record yet?
No. I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Favor?
Aye. Good. Shut that